Good evening. It's my pleasure to call to order the meeting of August 12th, Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission to order. If y'all would stand with us, please. I've asked our representative, Mike Sparks, to lead us in our prayer and our pledge tonight. Mike?
That way, please. Dear Father in heaven, we come before you, Lord, with humble hearts, just asking for guidance and wisdom and favor upon this body here tonight, Lord. Lord, bless this county, Lord. Bless this state. Bless this country, Lord Jesus. Lord, be with our president. Be with our governor. Be with our mayor, Lord. And just continue to make this one of the greatest counties to live, work, and retire in, Lord. Let us always be able to deliberate, Lord, and just work towards your goodness, Lord Jesus, and continue to bless this great state. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Face the flag, if you would, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you, Representative Sparks. At this time, we'll have our roll call. Gail, if you'd call the roll, please.
Rhonda Allen. Jim Averwater. Veronica Buchanan. Here. Will Jordan. Here. Mike Cush. Present. Craig Lynch. Here. Pettis Reed. Here. Steve Sandlin. Here. Mike Vaught. Here. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Minutes for July 8th meeting. I'll call on our Vice Chair, Craig Lynch.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the July the 8th minutes.
I have a motion to approve the July 8th minutes and a second. Thank you, Steve. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. That motion carries. Items withdrawn or deferred, Doug?
No, sir. Nothing withdrawn nor deferred.
Okay. I believe on your desk in front of you have a copy of the Building Codes report. Take a second to look at that if you want to, and if you have any questions, Dave's got a bunch of notes and he's got a lot of answers. No questions, we'll move on. Item number 6 is waiver request. Item A, Gary Taylor, item number is 13-4007, requesting a waiver from 50-foot requirement for access easements for property located behind 5121 Leanna Road. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, the property is located to the south of 5121 Leanna Road. I'll call Planning Commissioner's attention to the diagram that's in your agenda packets. That might make the explanation a little easier to follow. Back in 2001, there was a 25-foot access easement approved by the Planning Commission to access the property located at 5151 Leanna Road, which is immediately to the west of the subject property. This easement extends from Leanna Road through the property at 5155 and terminates at 5151, again, if you're looking at your drawing. The applicant owns the subject tract, the larger 6.8 acres, and would like to subdivide 5 acres for an additional dwelling unit. It'd really be the 5 acres, the southernmost 5 acres of that property. The remaining acreage would be combined with the property, as you can see, at 5155. So that'll, basically what'll happen is they'll have to do a subdivision plat combining the remaining acreage with the existing house at 5155 Leanna Road. Even with the 50-foot access easement accessing the proposed property, they still would have to access the existing 25-foot easement to Leanna Road. So because of that, the applicants are just asking permission to extend the 25-foot easement to serve the proposed 5-acre tract. If this waiver is granted, they will have to do a subdivision plat to take that remaining 1.8 acres and combine it with the existing house, and that will require Planning Commission approval based on state law. If you've got any questions, we do have an applicant. The applicant is present, so if you do have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, or the applicant will be happy to answer them at this time. As far as fire protection is concerned, there are fire hydrants located within 1,000 feet, so there's no issue with that. Really, if this were a 50-foot access easement all the way to the road, we wouldn't really have any issue with it. It would be okay. So just with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions of staff? Hearing none, we'll move on. This time I'll declare a public hearing open.
There's no public hearing required for this, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, it's a waiver request.
Yes, sir.
I'm getting ahead of myself, you guys. Way excited, I guess, for what's coming tonight. Questions, answers, recommendations, motions?
Well, I take it they have enough width there to get the utilities in and out and still have a driveway, and that'll be
Yes, sir. I mean, that's
on their shoulders to make
Right.
all that work.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
There's been an easement right there. It may have just been recorded in 2001, but there's been a path in and out right there. It's out in my neighborhood. Been out there for my whole life, and so I don't think this is a great stretch from what's been there for a long time. With that, I'll make a motion to approve as presented by staff.
Motion and a second to approve the request. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. Item number 7. Now we're getting into the public hearing. Item A, George and Veronica Buchanan, item number 13-A013. Location is 1700 Butler Road. The tax map is 126. Parcels are 41.00 and 41.01. The county commissioner is Joe Frank Jernigan. The site size is approximately 14 acres. Tax map 126.00, and the parcels again are 41.00 and 41.01. Existing zoning is commercial neighborhood. Proposed zoning is light industrial. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, these properties are located along Butler Drive. Just in a way of a little history on these properties, they were rezoned from R10 originally to I2, which was industrial, under the old zoning resolution back in 1985. In 1999, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved a conditional use permit for a children's daycare center, which is currently on operation on the smaller of the two parcels there. At the time, it was just one whole tract. Based on the regulations in the previous zoning resolution, the daycare center at that time was the only use that was approved for that property. So any other use they had or proposed would have to have come back through the Planning Commission or possibly Board of Zoning Appeals with the conditional use permit process. There were also variances granted to the fire hydrant requirements in 1999, also a front setback and screening requirements both in 2004. The property with the daycare center was subdivided from the parent tract back in 2012. The current zoning map, which became effective on January 1st, 2013, zoned both the property where the daycare is located and the remaining acreage commercial neighborhood. And part of the determining factors we used when looking at the existing businesses on property, we tried to match the business with an appropriate zone, which I think is why the commercial neighborhood was chosen for those two parcels. At that time, we felt that was an appropriate zone considering the use of the property. It is used for a variety of retail and personal services, but not for larger, more potentially impactful commercial uses. The owner of the property has since requested both properties be zoned to light industrial, which was similar to what was in effect prior to the new zoning map taking effect at the beginning of this year. Now, Joe B. Jackson Boulevard, as you can see, it's hard to tell on this because this arrow is a little old, but you can see that this is the area here where Joe B. Jackson is being extended down to the south and back to the west. It's going to link into the existing Joe B. Jackson Parkway and the Stevens Bend subdivision, and they're actually widening that portion of Joe B. Jackson from the subdivision to 231 Shelbyville Highway. Both Joe B. Jackson Boulevard, Butler Drive have a pronounced industrial presence, as you can see right up the road. You've got some larger industrial uses, General Mills just a little further up the road. Of course, on the other side, Joe B. Jackson Parkway, again, it doesn't go that far over, but you've got the Amazon plant, several other larger industrial uses. Staff expects similar development in this area, especially in consideration of the fact that the road is going to be extended from the existing interchange essentially all the way to South Church Street, US 231. So with that, staff does recommend approval of this, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time. Oh, let me go through the
Chairman
pictures.
Phillips, I will not be voting on this because I have a conflict of interest, so I won't be commenting or voting or anything, and I want to recuse myself from this item.
I forgot I had some pictures here. This is actually across the street looking at the existing daycare and some of the property across the way there. Now I'm back on that same side of the street. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff?
I've got a couple. So the daycare is currently on site, and it's
Correct.
It's in business.
Yes, sir.
Right. And looking at the proposed details on page 2 of 3, it looks like they're proposing no change.
Correct.
To the building.
No.
It's basically just a rezoning thing
Yes, sir.
at this point.
Yes. Yeah. There are no development plans at this point.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none at this time, I'll declare the public hearing open for item number 13-A013. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. Name and address for the record, please.
George Buchanan, 5825 West Elm.
Thank you. Turn around. Thank you, George.
I would like the commission to, I would like to have my land put back like it was, to light industrial. And that's it. And I appreciate it.
Questions for Mr. Buchanan? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak for or against this rezoning request? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed, and we're open for business. Questions, comments, or motions?
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask Doug one question. You said there was a waiver on the fire hydrant, but then there's a fire hydrant on this one parcel, which I don't know which one that is, but
I think at the time there wasn't anything out
any
there at the time, and then since then there's been one installed. So it's kind of moot. But you're correct. There is one nearby.
I got you. Well, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve the request.
Motion to approve and the second. Any other discussions? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, if we could note one abstention on that vote as well.
Sorry?
If we could just note one abstention on that vote as well. I know she'd mentioned it at the beginning, but just for the record that she did abstain from that vote.
So noted, Gail. Item number 7B, draft zoning ordinance amendments. Item number is 13-5002, exterior storage and exterior display. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is something that commissioners we've talked about over the last couple meetings. You'll see attached with the agenda some proposed amendments regarding exterior storage and exterior display in commercial, industrial, and special character areas. You'll recall the discussion we had kind of centered around the fact that in the lighter commercial zones, if you will, commercial neighborhood especially, there wasn't the ability to have outdoor storage on the property. Of course, we were approached by someone that wanted to use a piece of property zone commercial neighborhood that wanted to use it for some exterior display of merchandise for sale, basically some large gazebos, storage buildings, those kind of things. So after some discussion, we discussed the possibility of separating exterior storage from exterior display. So if there's items for sale that can be displayed but not stored without being for sale. So what staff has done is, if you look at your agendas, you'll see that we've added a couple of definitions, or we're proposing to add a couple of definitions to the appendix for definitions under the zoning ordinance. One being exterior display, which would be the placement of goods, materials, or other property for sale outside of a building or structure. And then exterior storage would be the placement of goods, materials, other property outside of a building or structure, for the purposes of storing the materials or equipment for future use but not for future sale. And you'll see that the amendments themselves, while this is 2 or 3 pages long, it's pretty much the same type of amendment that we've done in each section. Section 605 of the regulations deals with the commercial storage. You can see what we've done is we've allowed exterior storage of goods within the commercial general and the commercial services, which are both heavier commercial zones. but you'll see we add a subsection B for exterior display, and we do allow the display in commercial neighborhood, commercial services, and commercial general. You'll see that we did propose that we would not allow any portion of the display to be within a required landscape yard or a landscape or buffer yard or landscape area, say like in a parking lot or anything like that, or any required parking areas. What we'd like to avoid in that situation is if somebody's required to have 10 spots and they use exterior display for half of that, then they're taking away their required parking. So we didn't want to see that happen. And then we also put all exterior display surface must be or shall be constructed of a durable material and graded to prevent ponding within the area. That's just to help with stormwater management. The amendments are pretty much the same for Section 7, which is in the industrial zone. We would allow exterior display in both the heavy and the light industrial, but exterior storage wouldn't change much, with the exception of taking out that one sentence there, which is then dealt with under the exterior display. And then again, under the special character area regulations, you'll see we did pretty much the same thing there. So that's kind of staff's first stab at it based on the comments we heard from the previous Planning Commission meetings. We do, after looking at the regulations that from some of the surrounding areas around us, we did notice that some of them had different setbacks. Some may say, you can't put it within the required front yard or something to that effect. Also, a limitation of materials for display. Some of the regulations include limitations on what could be displayed, such as motor vehicles, storage buildings, those kind of things. But staff kind of wanted to keep this general and did want if you wanted to see any more possible amendments to this, we could just take your guidance from there. But I think what we have is pretty workable. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Doug, on under exterior display, the second bullet under B, where you described the surface area as durable.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that going to be defined anywhere?
We haven't defined it necessarily, no. I think kind of what we had in mind, we didn't want to see an area that was going to become, muddy in a sense. But we didn't want to say they had to be paved at the same time. So rather than try to come up with all a list of different materials that could or could not be used for a durable surface, it would allow staff a little bit of leeway in that regard. But I don't know how you would define something quite like that. Again, we're not wanting them to have to pave everything.
Right.
So, but at the same time, gravel would probably be an acceptable surface. Grass, even if it's well maintained, can be a good surface. If there's not a lot of back and forth on it, moving things around, that can work. It's just a matter of looking at what they're proposing.
Try to work on a definition just so they have some idea of what it is you're looking for. I mean, I'm fine leaving it as long as there's some clarification on what that is.
Yeah,
so we don't end up in a debate over what's durable, what's not.
We can certainly do that.
Dirt can be durable if it's not wet. So.
Right.
Then the other question I had is storage, where we say that it can only be in the rear of the principal building. We've looked at some oddly shaped plats, and sometimes they might be long and narrow, and so it might need to be to the side. Is there any flexibility in this where we can look at site-specific storage?
The way it's currently written, no, but we could build some in if that's something what you would like us to see us do.
I think we're going to need some flexibility because, we always get those odd-shaped, poorly utilized lots that might be good for something if we could figure out a clever way to do it. So I just want to make sure we've got some flexibility in here to be able to.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Doug, when you say storage in here or display, either one, does this allow racks or that kind of thing? Could you store pipe? What are we talking about, really?
Well, it could be that. We weren't really trying to limit what could be stored outside, which is why the storage is really limited to the heavier commercial zones. We didn't want to see the storage in a commercial neighborhood because that's really supposed to be more of a neighborhood-friendly type zone. So, but it could be racks, it could be a pipe outside storage of pipes, it could be lumber, anything like that. Sorry? Some of those might be allowed more in the heavier commercial zones, but not in a commercial neighborhood zone.
Other questions?
One quick question on the one-liners and all three parts right there that's taken out.
Yes.
explain that to me just a little bit there? Just
That part that's double crossed through, is that the part you're talking about? Yes, sir, okay. Basically, under the way it's currently written, what that allows is vehicular craft and related equipment, basically a car lot. They can store their cars because that's really their inventory outside. So that allowed for that kind of use, but didn't really go any further than that, which is why I think we wanted to look at possibly opening it up a little bit. We took that out of there because really that's covered under exterior display at that point. So it was kind of redundant to have it there and then reiterate it again under exterior display. But that particular part that we crossed out allowed for people with car lots or like go-kart sales or something like that, golf cart sales, something like that, ATVs, anything like that, to have a display area on the lot. That's what that covered.
Doug, if you had an area that wanted to be put in the special character district, and you know there was somebody there that's been in business for 30 years, and they had some storage that wasn't necessarily behind the building, would there be a grandfather?
Yes, sir. Yeah, if it was previously in existence before this took effect, then it'd be allowed to continue, just like any aspect of the zoning.
Doug, I'm concerned that this is a little too broad on the junk man who piles stuff in the front yard and the dumpster divers and everything's for sale for $2 or whatever. Where is that going to be allowed or disallowed? I mean, is there something in here that...
You're talking about junk sales? I'm sorry.
You know, there's always somebody in every neighborhood that drags something home and piles it up in the front yard and puts a for sale sign on it. And you might be just running a junk business, you know. Are those prohibited in here, or does this open up that opportunity to some?
Well, the way it's currently written, it might open up that kind of opportunity. Now, since we've got a few things to work on here, I feel pretty confident in saying that this will go back to staff level for us to make some tweaks to it. And we can try to come up with maybe some language that might prohibit what you're thinking about. Because obviously we don't want to open it up for anybody to just, go out there yard sailing one day and then come back with all their various wares and throw them in the front yard and resell them, because that's not really the intent of this. I think maybe something we could do, now thinking about it, might be to maybe put something in the definition for exterior display that talks about, has to be related to the sales of what is on the property. If it's business A and they have a whole bunch of stuff in the front yard that's not completely unrelated to that, then obviously I think we might be able to work with that. But I understand where you're going with that. And I think we can come up with some language that might be able to help with it. I don't know if we'll ever be able to completely eliminate it, but we can try to at least try to head it off before it becomes a problem.
Questions? Ready for the public hearing? This time I'll declare the public hearing open for item number 13-5002. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this draft zoning ordinance amendment, please come forward. I see no one rising. Declare the public hearing closed. And once again, we're open for other questions, comments, or motions.
Sounds to me like we've got some questions still need to be answered, so I'll make a motion we send this back, let staff report back to us at the next meeting. Of course, if we do substantial changes, we'll be right back doing another public hearing, but we didn't get a large crowd of people wanting to argue about it, but we do need to do something to allow the guy to, in the instance with the many warehouses, but we also don't want to have somebody out there selling used tires in their front yard. So we'll leave that to staff to work all that out and bring it back to us. And that's my motion to send it back.
Motion to defer.
Yes.
Defer. And a second. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of the motion to defer item number B, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. meant to mention on item 7A, the Buchanan rezoning request, or the waiver request relates to when this will come before the county commission. And if my calendar is correct, I think the county commission will hold a public hearing on September the 9th. That's Thursday evening, September the 9th at 6 p.m. Item number 7C is consideration of the draft subdivision regulations for Rutherford County. Notice to the public of a public hearing was published in the July 7th, 2013 issue of the Murfreesboro Post. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm happy tonight to present to you the draft of the Rutherford County subdivision regulations, our first public hearing on this. You'll know that we've been discussing this over the last several meetings and work sessions, but this is the first public hearing that we've had on this particular set of regulations. But before we get into the regulations themselves, and I know there's several people in the audience that are going to want to speak tonight, so I'll try to keep this brief. I just want to kind of go over the quick process to this point. You'll recall back in 2008, 2009, the county granted funding for basically what we were calling the Comprehensive Plan and Planning Tools Update. The process started in earnest back in 2009. We had a number of community meetings. There was a Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee that was established and met several times. Mr. Everwater worked very tirelessly on that committee. I'd like to thank him for his service there. Ultimately, after several meetings and work sessions and whatnot, it was adopted by the Planning Commission. This was the comprehensive plan back in April of 2011. That really set the foundation for the planning tools update that came after that. The first item that we looked at was the zoning ordinance. You'll recall the first draft of the zoning ordinance was distributed back in August of 2011. We had a number of work sessions, different community meetings. We had a total of 4 public hearings, 3 at the Planning Commission and 1 at the Board of Commissioners. Received just a huge amount of public feedback on this. Ultimately, it was recommended approved by the Planning Commission in August 2012 and was recommended, and actually it was approved, by the Board of Commissioners in November of 2012, with the effective date being January 1st of this year. So after that, the last part of the puzzle, so to speak, was an update to the subdivision regulations, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. The first draft was distributed to the Planning Commission back in January of this year. We've had 7 work sessions at the Planning Commission level since that time. We've also met with engineers and surveyors about some of the concerns and comments that they've had about this, and tonight is our first public hearing into this process. So with that, I just kind of want to give a quick overview into the document itself, the major changes. When it comes to this, the sheer volume of changes that we did in the subdivision regulations, quite frankly, it didn't come anywhere near to what we did with the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance pretty much was a complete overhaul. Really, with the subdivision regulations, we did change a few things, and we'll go over the major items that we changed. But for the most part, most of the process stayed relatively the same, and even the regulations we did change really didn't change a whole lot. So just the sheer magnitude of what we changed with the subdivision regulations really wasn't anywhere near the level that we had with the zoning. But just to go over some of the major changes that the Planning Commission, I know, has been briefed on, but we'll just kind of give you a quick overview, and also for those who are here and those maybe watching at home. The first, and probably one of the largest changes we've made, is in Article 2, which is the procedures for subdivision plat approval. The way we currently classify subdivisions is dependent on the number of lots. Anything that has 4 or more lots is considered a major subdivision. Anything with 3 or fewer lots is considered a minor subdivision. Under our proposed regulations, we are changing that. It's not so much dependent upon the number of lots anymore. It's going to be dependent upon the improvements that are being proposed. So, for instance, in a major subdivision, it can be a division of 2 or more lots, but it would include things like right-of-way or street extensions, dedication of right-of-way or possible utility easements. Now, that is excluding private service lines. We're talking your larger trunk lines, and we're talking about utility easements. Any new or altered drainage easements, and then kind of a catch-all, any other dedication, reservation, improvement that would require construction documents to be approved prior to a final plat approval. Minor subdivisions would basically be any subdivision of land that doesn't qualify as a major subdivision. So again, not so much dependent on lots, really dependent more on what kind of improvements are being made. So if they have an existing road, existing easements are all set, they're not dedicating any right-of-way, they're just tracking off parcels of land on a road that are under 5 acres, then that would be considered a minor subdivision. There is one more category we added in, and this is any subdivision. It's called a partition. Any subdivision with 2 lots or less that requires no public utility or facility extensions. State law grants staff essentially the ability to approve those kind of plats administratively. Again, they have to be either 1 or 2 lots, and they can't have any right-of-way extensions, dedications, anything like that. It's basically what we would consider the minor plats that are administrative now, that don't really come before you. Those that we can handle at staff level, we just would call those partitions. The approval process for major plats, this is essentially unchanged, but it is a little bit different. There is a pre-application conference. Then there's a submittal of a preliminary plan for Planning Commission approval, which would essentially be kind of the master plan of the development. Following that, the next step would be submittal of any construction drawings for staff review. This is the information that you typically would see on a preliminary plat right now. This could be your showing the locations of your pipes, the pipe sizes, the grading, drainage layouts, those kind of things. You'll still see general layouts and general drainage schemes under the preliminary plan, but the actual pipe sizes and drainage calculations, those kind of things would be more of a staff review under step 3. And then, again, you would be involved in step 4 with the submittal of the final plat for Planning Commission approval. The approval process for minor plats and partitions is similar, except that you will see a pre-application conference and submittal of a final plat, but since those don't require any utility extensions or anything like that, you don't see steps 2 and 3 like you do under the major plats. They'd go right from the pre-application conference to the submittal of the final plat, and depending on the number of lots, it would either be Planning Commission approval or staff review at that point. Some other changes, and I'll kind of give you the change and how that's different from what we currently have. Preliminary plan approvals are valid for 2 years. The Planning Commission can grant a one-time extension for 1 year on the plan. Plats, basically this is referring to what we currently call a preliminary plat. They are currently approved under the current regulations with a valid period for just 1 year, and there's no limit on the number of extensions that can be granted. We have some subdivisions out there that have been extended numerous times. Final plat approvals would be valid for 180 days for major plats and then 60 days for minor plats and partitions. And we currently have no expiration dates for final plats. The reason we put that in there is because we do have a few in the office that have come in and then we've reviewed them, we've sent comments out, but then nothing else ever happens to them. They just basically take up space in the filing cabinet, essentially is what they do. So what this is doing is developer hopefully will not submit any kind of a final plat until they know they're within that window. After approval, they'd be able to go ahead and record their plat. Plats conditionally approved by the Planning Commission. Sometimes we'll see a subdivision plat at the Planning Commission. There'll be a few outstanding changes that need to be made. Right now, there really is no time frame as far as getting those revisions to us just before they're approved or before we'll officially approve them or sign them for recording. Those would have to submit revised plans back to staff within 30 days of approval at the Planning Commission. Private easements. Any subdivision with more than 3 lots off an existing or new private easement would require rezoning to a plan unit development. So they'd have to come through the PUD process first. It's okay up to 3 lots. It's just when you start getting to the 4th and lot and above is where we require the PUD. We don't see as many of those as we used to anymore. Fire hydrant requirements. Our current requirement states that it must be located within 1,000 feet of all lots, and that's what we're proposing in our draft as well. Now, this is something that's not actually within the draft. This is something that kind of came up within the last couple of weeks with discussions from our fire staff. Our current regulations don't specify really whether that measurement is as the crow flies or, as I would call it, as the truck drives. Historically, it's been enforced as the crow flies. Now, after discussing this with our fire officials, they feel that it's a more appropriate regulation to make it as the truck drives. So the proposed change that we are asking to make, and again, this is not in the draft, but we're asking if this is approved that this verbiage be included in there. The fire hydrant shall be placed to ensure lots within all subdivision lots are within a maximum of 1,000 feet of a hydrant And then you see that existing, or that new language there, it's underlined, bolded, and italicized, as the fire apparatus would lay hose on a public or private street, and then the rest of it would remain as is, with a note on the final plat stating fire hydrant shall be installed per the regulations of the water provider. In essence, this change would make the regulation as the truck drives, as opposed to as the crow flies. Probably the one item that has received more attention than any of the requirements that we are proposing in the subdivision regulations has to do with the residential sprinkler system. And I know that's probably why a lot of folks are here tonight, so I'll just give a quick overview. First thing I want to do is talk about our existing regulations. And again, these are regulations that are currently in effect. The regulations that we have for residential sprinkler systems were approved back in, I believe it was March of 2009. They apply to major subdivisions only, 4 or more lots, where fire hydrants are not located within 1,000 feet of the lots and cannot be installed. Now, just to clarify, the fire hydrants must be installed if they can be. If the line in the area can support a fire hydrant, it's not an option for them to say, well, we're not going to put fire hydrants in, we'll just ask for the waiver and go with the sprinkler system. That's not how this regulation is designed to work. If the fire hydrants are able to be supported by the line, then a fire hydrant has to be installed. And if that is the case and the fire hydrants are there, then these sprinkler requirements simply do not take effect at that point. Sprinkler requirements do not apply if fire hydrants are within 1,000 feet of all subdivision lots. If the fire hydrant in that area cannot be supported, the applicant applies for a waiver to the Planning Commission. Again, this is what currently happens. And if granted, if the waiver is granted by the Planning Commission, one of the requirements is that residential sprinkler systems have to be added to newly constructed homes. Existing homes in new major subdivisions are exempt from this provision. Sometimes we'll run into a situation where somebody's subdividing off a farm or something like that, and there's an old farmhouse that they want to keep as part of the subdivision on its own lot. The requirement would not make them go back and have to retrofit the house. That is not at all what we're talking about here. Now, some interesting numbers that I looked back since 2009 when we originally adopted this particular standard that is currently in our subdivision regulations, just to get an idea of how often this has been applied. Since 2009, after this regulation took effect, the Planning Commission has looked at 39 different fire hydrant waiver applications. Of those 39, 35 of those have involved 1 or 2 lot subdivisions. The other 4 were all 3 lot subdivisions, except for one. I think there was one that was a 4 lot subdivision. And out of all those that were not 1 or 2 lots, the only one that required a sprinkler system was the one that was the 4 lot. And that was out of all of the 39 that we've looked at, we've only had to apply this one time, and that's been about 3 to 4 years that we've looked at. Quite frankly, we just don't see this come up very often. Most of the areas that have been developed at this point do not require, the major subdivisions at least, do not require the sprinkler system. Usually there's enough fire pressure in the area for the hydrants that this isn't becoming an issue. Now, we do know that there are areas out in the county where at some point that might become a problem, but currently the vast majority of what we look at are 1 or 2 lot subdivisions. Under our proposed regulations, really the only change we are proposing to make is, rather than, and again, this has to do with the fact that major and minor subdivisions are now going to be determined by the improvements, not so much by the number of lots. It would apply to major and minor subdivisions with 3 lots or more, as opposed to the 4 lots. That is really the only change that we're making here. 1 and 2 lot subdivisions were still exempt. All those, the 35 of the 39 that we looked at would have been exempt from this provision that we're talking about. Again, fire hydrants have to be installed if they can be. Sprinkler requirements, again, don't apply if the fire hydrants are present. And if it cannot support a higher fire hydrant, then the waiver process is the same as what we currently have under the subdivision regulations that are in effect at this time. Now, Planning Commissioners will recall that late last week we did receive an Attorney General opinion regarding the approval of a sprinkler requirement. We will talk about that later, but staff did forward that to you all. So I just wanted to let you know that we are, of course, aware of that, and we made you aware of that as well. For this last part, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hill, our engineer, and he'll handle this last slide.
From the engineering side, Article 4, 5 major changes in the subdivision regulations. The first one is the bond amount. in the future in the regs, the proposal would be to do 110% of the improvements and set that as the bond amount, and we're going to get the design engineer to submit that cost to be approved by engineering. So 110% and to be submitted by the design engineer. The next thing is as working with our highway superintendent, Mr. Brooks, we've kind of come up with a better process for our street design and construction. And so 1 year after the installation of our asphalt binder, we're going to require within 365 days that asphalt topping is put in place. And now there is an exception to that. If they happen to pave in November or something and the asphalt plants are closed, they can get a 6-month extenuation through our office. And then after that, they can come to you guys and ask for 6 more months. But outside of that, and this is to prevent issues we currently have where we have roads that sit in binder, which is not designed to be a long-term asphalt course. And so this is to try to prevent some of that in the future. Also, we're looking to require as-built drawings, which is something actually our stormwater regulations require now. And basically, as the subdivision is completed, that the surveyor and engineer would go back out and basically ensure that the infrastructure that was installed, it was installed at the proper elevations and sizes and things like that. And that gives the county another level of assurance that what was put in was done the way it was designed. On top of that, when it's all said and done, the road's topped, and everything's finished, we're wanting to basically use the current bond that's in place on the subdivision and basically hold it for a year and count it as a warranty period. We kind of do this now. We just don't spell it out. And so to put 1 year in there, and that protects us. If the road's going to fail, most of the time within that first year, you're going to know it. And so that protects the county from them going out and topping it one day, getting it approved the next, and then it falling apart. So, and then we also spent a great deal of time going through sidewalks, and I think we've talked before about the issues we've had with sidewalks. Our past regs just don't really clarify their intent and the maintenance and responsibility and inside of the right-of-way, outside of the right-of-way, and liability. And so after lots and lots of research and meeting with Josh and our attorneys, and we think the best thing we can do is to use the verbiage that we have in the regs that basically says that the county will not be responsible for the maintenance of sidewalks, and that was with the direction of Mr. Brooks, and it would be under his direction if they were to be maintained. And so we've got that spelled out pretty well in the regs, and then we would have to follow up with subdivisions that did want sidewalks to go through and basically have that spelled out on the plat. And so just trying to be a little bit more upfront about it and to try to protect ourselves in case they're built not to standard or built after the case, which is what we're running into now. HOAs are building them and they're not on the plans, and so we're just trying to protect the county. But those are the 5 biggest things from the engineering side in Article 4 that we looked at.
Thanks, Eric. I will also call attention that we do have a couple members of our consultant team here from Briggs & Smith & Associates, Mr. Brett Smith and Randy Caldwell. They've done quite a bit of work on this, and we do appreciate all the work that they've done in helping us get this draft to where it is today. But they are here as well if you've got questions of them.
Before we got into the public hearing part, Mr. Chairman, I've been hit up with a couple things. One, I think you discussed very well about the sprinkler system and what will happen or not happen in that situation. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory, and hopefully folks are understanding that. But if not, then we'll continue on and make sure that that's perfectly clear. Sidewalks, we're not requiring them. It's if they put it in their regulation or in their subdivision, then here's the requirements that we expect.
That's correct.
And guidelines to go by, just like you were building a house. Here's what you got to go by. So
that's correct.
A little bit of confusion there on a couple folks that hit me up. Says, if I don't want sidewalks in my subdivision, I'm not going to put them there. I understand. We're not requiring you to have sidewalks. And then also, just if you'll explain, Eric, or maybe even the road superintendent if he's here or whatever, just explain just real quickly the changes in the maximum and minimum grades on the roadways in the subdivision. I had quite a few folks to ask me about that and the difference in, and the expense and why the expense when you can do this or do that. Hey, that's not my expertise. I'm going to leave it up to y'all. If y'all clear that up, just give me a couple minutes, Mr. Chairman, and we jump right into the public hearing, but that might resolve a few little things right there.
Sure. Basically, the change that we're doing is we have two types of roads. You have a curb and gutter section, and you have a roadside ditch section. And basically, in an attempt to design a better road and get better drainage, we're looking at leaving the curb and gutter section at 0.5%, which is the minimum that we allow for drainage in a ditch or anywhere, and then changing our roadside ditch section to a 1%, and that's just to, you can build a concrete curb to 0.5% pretty easy. You can set those forms up and do it, but when you start messing with dirt and you get in those ditches and they get flat, that's where we have ponding and mosquitoes and so the ditch section, they're looking to change that to 1% just to try to improve drainage, basically.
I guess I'm more into the pavement and how much more binder or how much more. That's what I'm really asking.
As far as asphalt thickness, we didn't change. We originally had looked at changing and going to an 8-inch pug mix stone requirement. And after much discussion and deliberation and meeting with some third-party geotechnical consultants and things, we're going to leave that as is and do more a little bit more comprehensive inspection to make sure we're getting what we're asking for is what we're getting. And
okay. Well, that cleared me up then. I'm sorry. I thought we were going in the other direction. So this is making the better inspections, whether it not be the water truck going down through there and seeing if it compresses more or something. This is more of a what's the compaction, or have a little bit better compaction test or something like that to make sure we got a better roadway
right
in the subdivision.
And all of that's more policy than it is regulation. That's more stuff that we'll do on staff, and a lot of that's depending on which part of the county is. I mean, this varies a lot from soil type to amount of rock and different things. So that'll be more policy things we look at in house. But as far as the regs, we went back. None of the 8-inch requirement. We've stayed with 6, and we're just going to try to do a little bit more comprehensive inspection to make sure we're getting what we're asking for.
Eric, are we not going from a 6-inch average to a 6-inch minimum?
We are.
So that is
yeah, we are changing the way.
6-inch average is here, but 6-inch minimum when you got to be there or above everywhere. So that's going to mean a little bit more gravel at minimum.
Yeah, I don't know that it actually said average before, but I think that was kind of the
way it's enforced. The enforcement may be changed a little bit.
I think so.
Doug, this might take a little bit of time, but would you walk back through each of the slides you put up there and let us look at it, see if we've got any questions before we start the public hearing?
I'm assuming you really don't, not so much interested in the process, just really right, okay. Okay, this first slide deals with the classification of subdivisions. I'll let you look at that for just a minute. Okay. This is the approval process. Again, this is pretty straightforward. These are some other changes. This really deals with the plat approvals, how long they're valid for. Again, preliminary plans 2 years, final plats 180 days for majors, 60 days for minors and partitions.
I have a question on that one. If they come in and the final plat's valid for 180 days and they move no dirt, is it still approved? And if new regulations come in before, the stormwater regs change, because we've all seen that, then what happens to that final plat?
Generally,
it's still good, even though no dirt has been moved.
And Mr. Hill will correct me if I'm wrong, but, well, actually, Eric, why don't you just take that one? I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah, in general, as far as stormwater regulations go, and this would be a final plat that's been approved and not recorded, it would still be grandfathered into those stormwater regulations. Yeah.
Deals with the private easements and then the fire hydrant requirement that changes to the wording in the fire hydrant location, basically as the truck drives as opposed to as the crow flies.
I haven't seen that before, and I'm going to want a little more time to digest that because, we see places where somebody's getting a building permit or a site plan, and there's a fire hydrant on a street behind them, and it's 300 feet back there to it, but it may be a half a mile around the road, and that's always met requirements before. And I'm not so sure the subdivisions we're approving are all within 1,000 feet as the truck drives, instead of just across lots and things like that. So, to me, that's the biggest changes we've seen. And personally, I think we need to digest that. I feel sure we're not just going to pass this thing tonight after the public hearing anyway. But to me, that's a huge change. It may be for the best, but it's still a huge change.
I've got one on the private easements. Can we still do a private easement with 5 lots on it then?
Well, you could do it, but if you're going to have a private easement with anything more than 3, you'd have to get rezoning first for a PUD, then come back through. I mean, at that point, it would just be based on...
It would fall under the PUD regulations.
Right, and you can still do up to 3 lots off a private easement without having to do that. That part hasn't changed.
And I've had a question in my neighborhood, so I'll ask it while we're on this. An existing one with 5 or 6 houses on it. I mean, it's an old one.
Right. Now,
possible to partition another lot off of that?
Well, based on the way it's worded right now, if they wanted to add like a 7th lot, let's say they had 6 and they wanted to add a 7th, they'd have to go through the PUD route. Now, if you'd like to possibly exempt the existing ones, then you could just put any subdivision with more than 3 lots off of a proposed new private easement. I mean, this is the way it's been worded since we did the draft, so, but that's the way we left it. But that's certainly a change that we could make, and I don't think that's hard. Sure. But to answer your question, if they want to add more lots, then they have to go to the PUD process. There's no other questions on this. These last 2 slides here deal with the sprinkler requirements.
Well, Doug, I was going to go back to that one thing on the fire hydrant deal. I thought we were mirroring or basically taking into what maybe insurance requirements or fire requirements or something, because I remember right after being elected in 90, help organize 2 subdivisions over where I was, about 1,000 foot from roadway, the front of your house from fire hydrant to fire hydrant. It wasn't like Commissioner was saying, if your cul-de-sac come around there behind you or beside you and the fire hydrant's over here, but you don't have one down the street and you're without 1,000 feet, then you're out. You can't go across chain link fences and woods and dog houses and whatever, to get there, because you can't lay the hose to fight the fire because of all the obstructions or whatever. So it's within the roadway of 1,000 feet. And so I thought we were putting it in to some requirement. I didn't know where that come from.
Well, there was some discussion on that when we first talked about the fire hydrant requirement, but it really was just that. We never really came to any kind of a consensus on it. So we just kept the requirement the way it was. And quite frankly, the requirement as it exists in our current regulations and even in the draft doesn't specify as the truck drives, again, for lack of a better phrase, or as the crow flies. And since I've been with the county, historically, it's always been enforced as the crow flies. Even when I wasn't director, that was just how it was enforced. So I think this change here was to kind of to do what you were saying, do it as the, where they lay down the roadway, not across people's fences and yard like you were just saying. And that was something that our fire officials really wanted to see.
What I'm saying is that requirement come from somewhere, though. I don't know if it was Consolidated Utility or if it was through the Insurance Association or something or whatever, but that 1,000 foot.
Right, yeah, and that's something that our fire officials may be able to speak a little more to. I don't think it's a CUD requirement. If anything, it would come from that side of it. It would come from the fire insurance side, but they could probably speak more clearly about that.
And staff check on that too and see what the other say, bedroom counties around Nashville that are adjoining counties?
Did we look any further into that?
How they define, what their regulation is on fire hydrants and how they define it?
I personally did not, no, sir. Yes, sir, absolutely. Mhm. And actually, some of our fire officials that we have here might be able to lend some of their expertise on that as well. Any other question on this particular slide? Again, these last two slides just dealt with, well, next to last two slides, dealt with the sprinkler requirements as they exist currently in our subdivision regulations, and then what we're proposing under the new regulations. Again, the biggest change, just the number of lots. Everything else about it's identical. And then finally, this last slide was Mr. Hill's slide. And that was pretty much it.
That cover it, Mike? Okay. Any other questions? About ready to call our meeting into a public hearing session. Let me just give a couple of guidelines, and I'll be real specific that they are not rules or policies, but our guidelines have been historically 3-minute public comments. I know that there are those that are representing groups, and if you need more time than that, you're welcome to it. Don't think that you're restricted to 3 minutes, but keep that in mind as you're coming up, because it appears that there could be a large number of folks speaking tonight, and to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to speak, if you could hold your comments to 3 minutes, we as a commission would appreciate it. But there, once again, if you're representing a group and you need more time, you're welcome to it, and you won't be cut off and you won't be cut short. We want to make sure that everything you have to say can be said tonight. With that, I'll declare the public hearing open on our agenda item 7C, the consideration for draft subdivision regulations for Rutherford County. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, if you would, please. I see no one coming forward. We'll declare the public. Thank you for breaking the ice.
Chairman Phillips, Commission, staff, I'm here to speak about the sprinkler systems and a couple of concerns. I know that this has been extremely well thought out, and I would just...
Name.
Joe Swanson, 2313 River Road. I know that the county has a responsibility to provide fire protection for the county, and I appreciate that. I don't know to what degree the county is covered. I've got to assume that close to 100% of the county has got to have some level of fire protection, whether that be mobile or pumper truck that stops by the creek that they know to get the water from, so that they can protect and have life safety. But my concern here is, if life safety is actually the concern, then why not smoke detectors? They are required in new construction today. Why doesn't the county put money towards the older homes and put smoke detectors in those, as opposed to sprinkler systems? As a general contractor that builds commercial, my concern with the fire sprinklers would be that if you don't have the size line there, therefore you don't have maybe the pressure there, when that water eventually gets to that sprinkler head, how much of a spread are you really going to get to fight that fire? I think that if it's the life safety issue, forget the property. If it is life safety, then those audible alarms are going to vacate that house quicker than the fire sprinkler will. The smoke detectors are more economical. Sprinkler systems can be costly. My concern there is that if the sprinkler systems go in, they're probably going to need some type of backflow device. There's going to need to be some type of inspection made on them. I just see something that will continue to be an expense for that homeowner. Once again, perhaps a program to promote smoke detectors in smaller or in older homes would be a better alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Anyone else?
My name is Fred Garbler. I live out on Stewart Creek Road, the county. And when I built my home in 1992, I installed a fire sprinkler system in it. I did it primarily for life safety, and I also installed smoke detectors that time, even before the residential code required it. I installed the ones that are wired together, that one goes off, they all go off. They're all a tool. One thing I look at is, quite simply put, when a fire occurs, if you want that fire to be tenable to all occupants, you got to put the wet stuff on the red stuff. Quite simply put, people are concerned about costs. It's not all that expensive. In fact, mine, due to the insurance breaks I get, it's already paid for the system 3 times. So actually, it's a moneymaker in a sense like that. But my primary concern is, I know when I did it, my kids were real small. They may or not hear the smoke detector. They may not realize what it is. Even though we practiced our fire exit drills, and we made sure that everybody in the house knew. But again, it was my own self-satisfaction knowing I was protecting my family. I was protecting heirlooms that I may have. A lot of things insurance can't replace. You and your family's life is one of them. And I've never had an incident. I've never had a leak. It's been a great thing, and I sleep better at night. And I'll entertain any questions.
Repeat your name, please.
Fred Garbler.
Thank you all for letting us have the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Bill Parsley. I'm the 2013 president of the Middle Tennessee Association of Realtors, and I reside at 313 Lehman Street in Woodbury, Tennessee. We understand that this is kind of a minor change. Some of this is already on the books, and we understand that. We understand it's a safety issue. As realtors, we're very concerned about safety of the homes that we sell. We live in the communities that we sell in. A lot of the people that I sell to are family and very close friends. So safety is a very important issue, as well as property rights. And when you start mandating things that need to be done, this issue kind of came up, and it's really not a big change, and we understand it, but it has raised a lot of questions. And that's kind of what I wanted to address with you, and as realtors, that's what we would ask that you think about. A lot of the questions that have come up, the gentleman that just spoke talked about installation costs. I talked to a builder this morning. I've been representing builders in new construction for over 10 years. I've developed subdivisions, so I got a pretty good background in this. And I had a discussion with him this morning. He just put one in a home that the couple elected to put it in. He said the very best bid he could get on 2,200 square feet was $4,000. And that's just for the installation of the system. That didn't cover the cost of the upgrade of the water tap, because a standard tap's not big enough to carry the water load. You have to increase the size of the water line going to the house. Because all the piping, the plumbing has to be installed in the attic space, you have to insulate the attic better. So there's a lot of incremental costs that come along with it, not just the cost of installation that need to be considered. Also, recurring costs. Every time there's a power outage, you have to drain the entire system and then recharge it back. And there's a certain way you have to do that. You can't just empty it out and charge it back. That's what he was telling me this morning. So I don't know. I'm sure there's different systems on the market, different costs, but these are some questions that have been raised. And as realtors and dealing with consumers buying new homes, one thing that we're asked a lot about is storm protection. I think a lot of our consumers are much more concerned about storm shelters and storm damage and threat of being hurt by storm than they are by fire. With integrated fire alarms that are installed in houses now per code, the early warning is great. You can get out, get your fire extinguisher, put it out if it's a small fire. If it's big, get out and let the thing, let the house alone. I saw the demonstration that the fire department put on at Kitchell the other day, and it was very impressive, but there were some questions that raised as well. That was in a small room, and he had talked to the installation company about the sprinkler system, and the size of the spread of these is questionable. When you get into bigger rooms with odd shapes, you may not get full coverage. Some other issues that we thought about ourselves as being homeowners, fires in attics, fires in walls, electrical fires that start in walls, the sprinkler's not going to get to that. Early warning is the way to go, we feel like. But this just raises a lot of questions. We would ask that you defer this for more discussion, maybe let consumers have a voice in this, because it's going to affect them. Anything that you ask the developer or the builders to do is going to be passed down to the consumer. They're going to pay it, period. It's all passed down to the consumer. So we would ask that you study it, talk about it a little bit more, answer some of these questions, get some independent study going outside of the sprinkler companies, outside of builders, and let a little bit of everybody be involved in this decision, because it is a big decision, can be going down the road. We know it's a minor change today, but looking down the road, we can see where this could raise a lot of cost to the consumer and limit what they can do in their own home. So we would just ask that you reconsider it, defer it, and study it a little bit more. Let the public, let the consumers have a little input. They're the ones that are going to be paying for it. And thank you very much. Any questions?
I've got a question. We brought this up several years ago because there's a lot of land in the county couldn't be developed.
Right.
And this was just brought forward, in my opinion, I may be wrong, as another tool in the toolbox. Because I'm a farmer by trade, and I know that a whole lot of people out there are farmers in the rural areas, and their retirement plan is their property.
Right.
And if they can't sell that property for a subdivision, it goes from this price to this price.
Right.
And if you
that.
take this sprinkler option away, that allowed that property to stay at this price, because it allowed that property to be developed that couldn't otherwise be developed. And so is it the realtor's standpoint that we need to take the sprinkler option out so that property cannot be developed and that property stays at this price? Because that's all it is. It's an option. If there's sufficient water flow, there's no sprinkler. This just gives you another tool in the toolbox to be able to develop that property in the rural areas that doesn't have fire protection. We did this so we wouldn't have to turn people down, or staff wouldn't have to turn them away and say, sorry, you cannot develop that property.
And I understand that, and that's a very valid point.
And so we can take that option. If everybody's against that option, we can do that. But then all of a sudden, Farmer Brown out there is going to realize his farm just went to a third of the value because it can't be developed. I don't think anybody's telling anybody they have to put in sprinklers. We're just saying that instead of us saying no, we're saying, well, you can develop it if you do this extra measure because there's not fire hydrants.
And I think as realtors, and that's a very good point, and I think at this point in time when it is an option to give a developer, if he wants to pass that cost on to the builder, and we're just kind of speaking on down the road for the future, this has raised a lot of questions that we had never thought about before, and we're just bringing these questions to y'all. That's all we're doing. You're making a very minor change, and it's an option, and we understand that.
We're just trying to leave the same tool in the toolbox that's been there for the last 4 years,
Right. I understand.
and allow these people to have the option to develop properties out in the rural areas.
And we're all for
I don't
that.
think anybody's trying to force consumers to pay for anything. We're just allowing the
Right.
the property owner to have that option.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Anything else?
I appreciate your politeness about saying that you understand what he's saying and you appreciate that we're trying to keep that tool in the toolbox, but you're asking us to take that tool out of the toolbox.
We're just asking
how can it be both
before
ways?
you proceed with this much further, make sure it's studied completely and considered fully. I'm not saying don't take it, not saying take it away. I'm just saying, you know how issues are. They start here and then they grow and they get into something else. This raised a lot of questions for us as realtors. I did not know that this was an issue until here recently. I've been developing subdivisions. I've worked with a lot of my friends are farmers. I worked at the co-op for years. I know all the farmers. I know how it is to come from a farm background, so I can appreciate that. That is a farmer's retirement, his farm. So we're not asking to take anything away. Just be sure you studied it through and considered it, and I'm sure you have considered it a lot. But there's been some questions raised and some things that just kind of put us on alert that we wanted to bring these issues to you and represent the sellers and the consumers.
I just want to make sure that everybody, you, us, the public, everybody is completely clear that if we take this option out, then there will be developments that will not happen. So if you want us to be pro-development, pro-builders, pro-home builders, you're telling me right now, if we take this out, you're okay with that, and you're asking, that's what you're asking for, is you're asking us to take that out.
Just to discuss it more, to make sure it's really what we want to do in the future.
Because if it comes out, there'll be land that will not be developable, and you're okay with that. Okay?
We would rather the emphasis be put on early detection and having the water lines run where they need to be run and have ample fire protection for everybody, and not just have a few pockets of consumers that have to pay more for their house because that system has not been put in place. Anything else?
I'm a member of the organization you're representing.
Right.
I can assure you that if there's a 20-lot subdivision somewhere that does not have adequate pressure for fire hydrants, that I'm not going to vote for it unless it's got sprinklers in, because I think that's unfair to the consumer.
I understand.
So I think we're all confused. I can't speak for everybody else about how they'd vote, but I think we're all confused as to what the uproar is, because it appears to us that we've given we've allowed more development by having the sprinkler option in there. And we have studied it, because I mean, we've been out as a group. I don't know how many of us went out, but I know I went out to Powell's Chapel during the construction phase, looked at it, had an update. So we've studied it pretty extensively.
Well, thank you. Anything else? Thank you.
My name is Steve Jensen. I am here representing the Rutherford County Home Builders Association. I wanted to wait because I actually wanted to know if I could ask you guys some questions, but the last exchange confused me because when Mr. Swanson came up, he sort of alluded to the fact that we currently have fire protection in the county. That would be my understanding, that we have fire protection in Rutherford County. Do we not? Right. Okay. So
some areas have fire hydrants and some areas do not. There's different levels.
Yes, I understand that. I mean, it's not in the city where we have a paid fire department and there's fire hydrants everywhere. But my understanding would be that I agree with you, gentlemen. I understand the responsibility that you have and you feel to provide fire protection for the county, for the residents of the county. I think that's why we have tax money going to fire equipment, and we have an excellent fire department. But you're saying that, no, we don't have adequate fire protection, and that's why you won't, if you do what we're suggesting, you won't approve subdivisions because we don't have a good, I'm sort of asking, I'm not trying to degrade the fire department.
Most of our rating right now in the county is a 9. We're trying to get to a 5. Some areas are a 5, if I understand. I think the city may be a 4 or 5 or something like that. 2. And you see where they are in the city. We're always trying to do better. And so, yes, we do have a great volunteer fire service, great bunch of men and women out there, trying to protect our structures. But we're trying to always get better. And so it's pretty self-explanatory about this is another option. So you're saying the Home Builder Association is wanting to take that option out, so this property may not be developed.
Well, I guess that was my question, because I come here thinking that we have fire protection. and that we can develop. And if it's true, and now you couple that with our other concerns about this issue, that if the issue is truly life safety, and we said this is our recommendation, is the dual mode smoke detectors. And when we presented that before, you guys I felt like you just blew that off and said that's already in the code, so it doesn't count. But if the issue is life safety, then and we have some issues in the state of Tennessee with the number of fire deaths that we have. So we're addressing an issue of life safety, but that problem of life safety is not in new construction. We don't have a problem with life safety in new construction because
Let me say something there. We will, though, if we build a subdivision and we don't have adequate pressure for a fire hydrant, then we will have an issue there. And that's what this addresses, is the allowing of a subdivision in an area where fire hydrants are not adequate. It doesn't matter how many fire trucks we've got. If there's not a fire hydrant there, then there's a safety issue.
Okay. We might have to agree to disagree, because having a fire hydrant in the front of the house doesn't help me get out of the house faster. So I'm living in a house. It doesn't have fire sprinklers because there's a fire hydrant in the front of the house. The house catches on fire. I don't have a sprinkler because it's not required because there's a fire hydrant in front of the house. How do I get out of the house? Now what's my life safety issue? It's what we're saying. It's what history, it's what the facts show, is there's not been a single related fire death in a house in Tennessee that had interconnected smoke detectors. Smoke detectors are what save lives. They go off, they tell you to get out of the house. The fire department shows up, there's a fire hydrant right in front of the house, you're going to put the fire out quicker. That's not life safety, that's property damage. So that's why, the last time I was before you guys, I really was trying to figure out what's the issue we're trying to attack. But having a fire hydrant in the front of the house doesn't help me get out of the house. Putting a sprinkler in the house really doesn't help me get out of the house faster either. It's the smoke detectors. It's the early warning. And I guess we're just missing on that because I really feel that that's the key. The home builder's position is life safety, fire department, fire issues. Smoke detectors have proven, since they went into the code and are required in houses for 15 years now, there's not been a fire death in those houses. So we have a problem in the state of Tennessee with fire deaths, but they're in the older homes that don't have interconnected smoke alarms. So now I think we're missing that connection, and we're saying, okay, we're dealing with new construction. We're going to put additional safety in, and because we have a problem with fire deaths in the state. Now it's also our position that this gentleman, I forget his name, but he came up and he said he built a house a number of years ago and he put it in his house. It's great, and that's the way it should be. I build houses. People ask me to put storm shelters in. I put them in. Somebody wants me to put in a fire sprinkler, I'll put them in. But for the county planning commission to say we're going to require an individual homeowner to put a sprinkler in is not the same as you providing a service to the community. You're requiring an individual homeowner. Now you're getting down to government mandates and homeowner rights and all that sort of stuff. It's our position that should be a decision of the individual homeowner. And especially since it's not really a life safety. We're addressing life safety with smoke detectors. And then if I can ask a question, I really want to know what you guys are doing about the Attorney General's opinion, because I kind of think that makes this whole discussion moot.
That'll be discussed after the public hearing.
Okay. Questions?
Just a comment. Otherwise, what we have in place here and what you're saying is two different things. This house isn't going to be built. Period. That's the difference. So it's either the house with a sprinkler in this situation, this is the only other option for them, or otherwise it's not going to be built. So it's not apples to apples here. This is another opportunity for this property to be built on. Otherwise, it's not going to be.
Okay, well, that's where I'm.
Because our regulations call for a fire hydrant. And without the fire hydrant, there is no subdivision. Period. It's gone. It never existed. So it's you're saying you'd rather just not have the subdivision at all.
No, I'm sorry.
Because that's what, because, I mean, like I said before, we would probably be okay with taking the sprinkler option out, but then that property's not going to be developed because our regulations require a fire hydrant.
Okay.
And this is the only way around that, is if you can't support the fire hydrant, then you can have the sprinklers as an option. And so I don't understand, like I said, I'm repeating stuff I said earlier, I don't see why the backlash is here, because you can always go back to just like that option doesn't even exist. Just don't build the subdivision. Because the requirements call for, or are you saying we shouldn't even require fire hydrants anywhere?
No, I'm not saying that.
You just said a fire hydrant in the front yard didn't do you any good, but that's what our subdivision regulation has said for years and years and years. You can't develop a major plat subdivision without a fire hydrant, and this is just another option to be able to build, if that, or one option, the only option, if the fire hydrant doesn't exist and stuff. And so, like I'm repeating myself a third time now, if we take the sprinkler option out, then there's a whole lot of property out in the county that just can't be developed. Subdivision won't happen, ever, until CUD gets around to having enough water pressure far enough out whichever road. Then it's going to get really political over there as far as who gets bigger water lines and things like that. But we're 20, 30, 40 years away from there being sufficient water to cover this entire county with fire hydrants, just because of the amount of water that's available and everything else. So I don't think anybody's saying anything about do away with smoke detectors. And one of the people earlier said we ought to be looking at older houses. Well, I've got a bunch of rental houses, and every time I do much of a remodel where it requires the electrical inspection, I have to bring them up to codes. And I'm putting smoke detectors in older houses pretty regularly. So I think a lot of that's already on the books.
I guess my only thought on, you're saying it's our regulations, and here we're discussing regulations. So I'm questioning whether the regulations are making sense. And from a life safety standpoint, I'm not seeing that they make sense, because the life safety has been addressed through interconnected smoke detectors.
Benson, I hesitate to ask anything, but we keep mentioning life safety, and I think most of them mention fire protection, and without adequate fire hydrants, there is not adequate fire protection. Volunteer fire departments can't come out and fight fires without fire hydrants. We've updated a few things the last 3 years that related to tankers and those kinds of things, but they're not available all over the county and would not provide adequate fire protection in my opinion anyway. So my thought is that you're talking about life safety, and we're talking about, in essence, fire safety, and the only way to do that is to fight fire with water. And if there's no water available through hydrants, our subdivision regulations don't allow development because there's not adequate resources to fight fires in the county, because it is, in essence, a volunteer fire department. And I don't know whether we can get into what's the county's required to do or not, because they're, in essence, volunteer fire departments. The adequate fire fighting is what we're trying to address. And if the hydrants aren't available, then our regulations say that land can't be developed. And that's the reason that we put in this body, put in the sprinkler system several years ago, was to allow for some of those lands that were out there that wanted to be developed was, okay, since there's no fire hydrants, we can put in sprinkler systems and you can develop the land. And that's where I keep hearing some back and forth here, is that we're talking about adequate fire protection and not opposing the smoke detectors and the smoke alarms and fire alarms and all those kinds of things. We think that they're necessary as well. But our whole thought process, and I shouldn't say ours, let me just say my thought process is that our regulations won't allow development unless there is adequate water available to protect those homes that are being developed in that area, and that means fire hydrants. And it's just a guess, but there are, I don't know, somebody help me, 25% of the land that's out there that probably wouldn't support it, and that may be erroneous, but I've heard that mentioned somehow, some way. And that land is developable if we had some way to protect those homes from fires, and sprinkler systems is the only thing that we could come up with. And it wasn't to stop development, but it was to actually help development, because our regulations will not allow it to be developed without, quote, fire protection, in my interpretation, and I could be a little wrong there too, okay? So trying to bring us together, I think you're saying one thing about saving lives, and we're on board with that, okay? But we're also saying that our regulations are saying something else. And what Commissioner Jordan was saying a minute ago, that if we took the sprinkler system out, all that leaves is the language that's in there that says you can't develop it because there's not adequate water supply to provide that protection that new development would need. And that's not the exact words, but in my interpretation, that's what it says.
Just quickly, I guess that's sort of not the direction that I was taking. I mean, I was under the assumption that we had adequate fire protection in the county. You know, through the volunteer fire department and stuff like that, I thought that, from my perspective, I considered that to be adequate. I used to be a volunteer fireman. My dad was a fire chief. My grandfather was fire chief. I mean, I get it. And so previously, I heard that this was about life safety. And then the only other little thing I'd say, and I'll get out of your hair, is that we're looking at changing regulations, and so I'm questioning the regulations. And so if the regulations say if there's not a fire hydrant, you can't develop. I'm saying, does that make sense? Now, if we don't have adequate fire department protection, I understand that a little bit better. So I was making an assumption that this was a life safety thing, and sprinklers don't address life safety from the facts, and I was thinking we had fire protection. So
that's what this whole process is all about, and we really do appreciate your input. You've been intimately involved in this process since we started it, and have spoken before this commission a number of times. And once again, it's beneficial for us to.
I appreciate the job that you guys are doing. I know you guys have put a lot of time into this. Thank you.
My name is Larry Farley. I'm the Ruff County Fire Chief. One thing that keeps being brought up over and over and over is that there hasn't been nobody die in the state of Tennessee with working smoke detectors. I got this mortality rate right here from the Tennessee Fire Marshal's office this morning, and so far 13 people have died in the state of Tennessee this year with working smoke detectors. So I'll just put that to rest. Second thing is we did the side-by-side burn last Thursday as an educational tool, just to try to form people into where everyone could make a better educated decision. Comment was brought up a while ago by Commissioner Vaught and Commissioner Jordan about the fire hydrants, and I want to explain to you the difference in that. ISO requires that each home be within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant. That's as the truck drives. That's why we asked that to be put in there. The reason for it, just like Commissioner Sandlin said a while ago, you can't go across the backyard. The difference between a 1,000-foot fire hydrant is the difference between a Class 5 and a Class 9.
Larry, will you clarify what ISO is?
ISO is the insurance services organization that goes out and rates departments and gives them their ISO rating, which is what the the insurance people do to classify their insurance. I get calls every day in my office from insurance companies who are reevaluating the insurance policies, and if you're outside of 5 miles of a fire station and more than 1,000 foot of a hydrant, people's insurance is going from Class 5, 6 to Class 10. Royal Glen subdivision, some very nice homes out there. Got a call this week from Mike Gentry, insurance agent, and this person's insurance was $1,200 a year, and because they're outside the 5 miles, their insurance was going from $1,200 a year to $3,000 a year. My issue with and I'm not going to beat the sprinkler thing to death, but my issue is if you don't offer some kind of fire protection as far as sprinklers or hydrants, how are you going to insure these homes? And what's the cost of the insurance on these homes? I mean, if you take the fire safety aspect out of it, but also mention about the adequate fire protection. We have volunteer firemen in this county. There's about 350. And I know I train them. They're some of the most well-trained, well-experienced volunteer fire in the state of Tennessee, across this nation. When they respond, the only issue is during the daytime, when you have a fire call, you may get 2 firefighters or you may get 12. You never know. There are some volunteer fire departments in this county that if they have fire tones go off in the daytime, they're getting 1 man in 1 truck. That's the fire text we had. It's not the fault. It's not the fault of volunteers. It's just the nature of the beast. We are a county that is reaching a population of 300,000 people. Since 2010, when the county created the county fire department, our response rate has gone up 50% every year. That includes fire alarms, structure fires, and motor vehicle accidents. We do vehicle electrification. So our volunteers do the very best job they can, and when they're in service, they're excellent. But the only problem with volunteers is that they're not always in service. They have to make a living like everybody else. So the reason I came up here was to explain the difference in the fire hydrants, what it means to have a fire hydrant to be able to lay out with a truck. As a truck rolls 1,000 feet, it makes a difference between it can make a big difference between a Class 9 and a Class 5, which could be anywhere to $500-600 a year on your homeowner's insurance. And I'm telling you, as this county grows and gets bigger, if we don't increase our fire service and create our stations and our locations, there's going to be a lot of Class 10s in this county, and insurance premiums are going to skyrocket. I thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you.
I'm Bill Donnell, General Manager at Consolidated Utility District, and I heard a number of different terms being represented here this evening and ideas and theories. And first of all, the CUD does not have a political stance on whether there should or should not be sprinkler systems, and I'm not here to address that. But we talk about pressures and flows and requirements for these fire hydrants. I want to give you a good example. I heard a statement here earlier that the size of the lines was a function of political influence. CUD does not size lines based on political influence. It's based on water quality. And I give you a quick example. If these people right here all represented residential services, and the water coming in from this end of a single feed was 30 days old when it hit that point right there, and the lines were sized such that by the time it got to this end, that water may be 45 days old, that's acceptable, okay? But the fire flow at the end of that line may only be 100 gallon a minute. That may be all that's able to come out that line because of the line size. We can upsize that line to maintain 500 or 1,000 or whatever we can get from this point up here, but suddenly we take that water coming in here at 30 days old, and it may end up being 90 days old or 120 days old by the time it comes out the other end. That's why we don't upsize those lines. There's what's called chlorine decay based on the amount of time that water spends in the line. So I guess the simple answer is why don't we just add more chlorine? Chlorine to clay produces what's called disinfection byproducts, which are trihalomethanes and haloacetic acid. Those are carcinogens. So even though we could turn around and add more chlorine here, the water on this end is not going to be safe to drink. So the only way around that, by upsizing the line to provide fire protection at this end, is to turn around and flush that water off to maintain that age. Well, once again, this is all treated water. It has an expense, and we have to flush a large volume of water to maintain that line. We don't have contracts with the Corps of Engineers. We don't have the ability to just start running water all over the countryside to maintain the fire protection at the end of that line. We talk about pressures. Low pressure is what we really need to talk about when you talk about fire protection is flows. Whether you had a 6-inch line serving this area right here, or you had a 48-inch line serving this area right here, the difference between this end over here and this end over here, the pressure is going to be the same under static condition. When the pressure drops is because when you try to flow large volumes of water down that line, it's called friction loss down that line. And that's why you have to have the larger diameters to reduce the friction loss in order to maintain the flows. And I just want to clear those concepts. It's not a matter of we don't like this gentleman at the end and we're not going to provide him fire protection, or we like him and we're going to. It's a matter of can we, and can we do it in a realistic fashion. And I just wanted to clear that up. Thank you.
One thing too, when you allow a hydrant on a line, if that hydrant is being used, you have to maintain a certain pressure to the homeowner's back up the line. Is that not correct?
That's correct. If we put anywhere in the system, we're supposed to maintain a minimum of 20 psi. So if we turn around and put the line down here and we open up the fire hydrant, we use that hydrant, if we drop the pressure anywhere else in the rest of the system below 20 psi, we're in violation of state law. So we also have to take into account what is the effect when we open that line and produce that quantity of water at the end.
Bill, I'm the one that made the statement about political, getting the lines. I didn't say it was. I said if we were to do away with the sprinkler ability or option, then it could become political as far as who's got a farm out there and they desperately want to develop it, and all of a sudden they're beating down your door and the CUD board. I said it would have the potential to become political.
I understand. Thank you. You know, one of the areas that we look at, you look at the avenues out here, and we have tremendous fire protection at the avenues based on its location, the 48-inch water main and the 20-inch lines that serve that. And you consider that the Embassy Suites is a huge customer out there, and of course you've got a lot of shops out there. They don't have a lot of water demand for the shops themselves as you run down there past, you know, the Best Buy and all the rest of those stores. But the bottom line is we end up with those lines are so big, and they provide tremendous fire protection in that area. But we have an issue with water quality on the backside because there's not enough domestic demand to keep those lines fresh. Now we got Peter D's coming, and there's going to be another hotel out there or another apartment complex out there, and so we're going to plumb those in such that we can maintain those demands. But you wouldn't think that water that is probably less than a day old being delivered to that site would, when it enters that site, would have a water quality issue. But because of the size of the lines for fire protection, it ends up getting old on the other side, and we have to flush water out there. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak?
My name is Steve Lane. I live at 6624 Scenic Drive in North Murfreesboro. I actually teach building construction at the Tennessee College of Applied Technology in Nashville, a licensed general contractor, residential and small commercial, although that's not an active license. I actually prepared a couple of pages of notes earlier as I was listening because like the gentleman before, I believe his name is Steve, the things that I had read is this was a life safety issue. I heard, my understanding, things I read in the paper, things I heard on the radio was this was an issue about saving lives across Tennessee. Apparently we rank pretty high in terms of fire deaths in the state of Tennessee. And I also read that to quote the fire chiefs that were part of a large statewide survey done by the University of Tennessee, the best way to prevent those deaths is interconnected smoke alarms. And I want to clear up a little discrepancy between the fire chief here and one of the gentlemen earlier. While there may be deaths with fire alarms, there was no deaths with interconnected fire alarms, which I think that's an important distinction to make. However, as I listen to all this, I hear there's lots of different things at play here. And I would suggest to you that the answer to all of these questions is something that he alluded to earlier, and that is eliminate the requirement for fire hydrants. I believe in a free society. I believe in free markets. I believe the best way to address this issue is let the market work it out. If you take out the requirement for sprinklers and for fire hydrants, the market will determine which of these subdivisions succeed and which ones do not. If a gentleman goes in and he develops a subdivision, it doesn't have adequate fire hydrants, I would imagine somebody that's smart enough to access financing for a home or pay cash for a home is smart enough to determine on their own whether that's a safe home to live in or not. And I think to suggest anything otherwise is a little bit arrogant. In fact, I think it's a lot arrogant. Yes, I would stand by this committee if they suggested that not only the requirement for sprinklers be pulled, but the requirement for fire hydrants be pulled. Let the market determine it themselves. You know, I bought a home before. I looked into the schools in the area. I looked into the crime in the area. This would just be one more thing that a homeowner could very simply look into. Is there, in their opinion, in their own opinion, adequate fire protection? I would suggest to you that in a truly free society, that inherent in the freedom to make good decisions is the freedom to make bad decisions. And I would suggest to you that it is not the proper role of this governmental body to determine what is a good or a bad decision in this market. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Severi. I own a home over on 1602 Ashlawn Drive in Murfreesboro. I'm also a business owner here in Murfreesboro, and I was required as a business owner to put sprinklers into my business, and found that the cost was substantial, over $20,000 to install it in a 1,200 square foot space, which I think is exorbitant, seeing how I don't have any flame whatsoever in the business. But protection of the public, it is a protection issue overall. However, in a private residence, my concern would be allowing the city, the county, any government agency into my home. Like the previous gentleman mentioned, this is my space, and I can make a educated decision on what I want to do with my space. There's already a lot of regulations for safety in that home, and a lot of them are for good, obviously. We're doing it for protection of the public, even though we're trying to get away from that idea of it. As a former volunteer firefighter, I could tell you that from past experience, other counties, instead of requiring fire hydrants to be within 1,000 feet of their homes, they tankered up. We bought a tanker truck, 5,000 gallons, for under $25,000. It increased the rating of the fire department in the area by 2. And for that little amount of water, it was a huge increase for the community. The cost was paid for by the developer. Partial cost was paid for by the developer. So I would propose that you folks look into that also. Tankering up. Tankering fuel tankering water is not an expensive proposal, and it doesn't intrude in anybody's personal space to do something like that. I was on roughly a little over 30 house fires, and we were able to easily, with our 8,000 gallons that we were able to show up on site, we only had to go and tanker more water twice to bring it in to fight the fire. So it was pretty easily accomplished. So that might be another avenue you folks can look into, rather than mandating fire extinguishers and still allowing folks out in the rural areas to develop their property as they wish.
Sure, your last name was Berry?
Severi.
Severi,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Chairman Mike Sparks, Smyrna 114 Woodland Drive. You know, I've spoke before at the Planning Committee a few months ago, and one reason I'm passionate about this is because I've got the phone calls from folks in my district. I get the phone calls from people who have closed their business, you know, because they can't continue to pay the property taxes. They can't continue the government regulations that's on them, even small businesses. I'm kind of seeing a trend out there that it's making it harder and harder for independent business owners to survive. And I think there's folks on this committee that would empathize with that. You know, one thing I like about this body, we've had good discussion here tonight. I know the commissioners, I know most of the planning commissioners here and the county commissioners, and y'all all care about this county. Most of you want to retire here. You know, there's no doubt. But, you know, you're seeing a culture that you may think, well, Mike, you're getting off on a tangent, but you're seeing two spouses having to work to make a house payment. Okay, and you think, well, Mike, that's just the norm today. Well, someone else is raising that child. You're starting to see almost not only just two generations living in a home, you're seeing three generations living in a home. And I'll dare say that the next 5 years, we're going to see more of that. You know, I had a guy call me earlier today from another county. I won't mention the county. And he was very passionate about this issue. He built a home. I guess he had some rural land. And he said he was going to have to put in 2 fire hydrants, 1,500 feet of water line, sprinkler system. He said by the time he was going to put a spade in the ground, just the impact fees and all, in that county, and y'all may know the county I'm talking about because it was excessively high a few years ago, it was $30,000. He backed off, dug a well, and he asked him, he said, well, what's my alternative? He said, well, you won't be able to get water, you get well water. So they wanted him to put in a generator. Okay, they suggested that he put a generator in. I mean, it's kind of ludicrous that we're even having a discussion like this. Put a generator in just in case the power went out to run that sprinkler system in this home. I often look back at what maybe your father would say. I think your dad had a lot of common sense. What my father would say had a lot of common sense. And the times that we're in, they would say some of these things are getting a little out there, getting a little crazy. Earlier I talked about, when we were a few months ago, we often get fired up about Bloomberg and his big gulps, something going on in San Francisco. This kind of stuff, in my opinion, is happening right here in Rutherford County. And maybe these subdivision regs need to be re-looked at. Maybe you need an ad hoc committee to study fire safety. I would argue that this minute, this hour, this second, fire safety is better today than it's ever been in the history of Rutherford County. Would anybody disagree with that statement? I don't think Commissioner Farley would disagree. I don't think Larry, Fire Chief, would disagree. And I'm proud that Larry's in this position. I'd say we have the best fire safety we've ever had in Rutherford County. And we have our challenges with growth, there's no doubt. We have our challenges with water. Like Bill mentioned earlier, there's no doubt. But when I see a small business, and you may think, well, Mike, those two issues, they're totally irrelevant. No, I think they're very relevant. And I brought up the issue of the fruit stand in Smyrna, and it sounds so crazy. I know Will's very familiar with it, the Chocolate family. And the man just sold fruit and vegetables on the side of the road. That's all he did. I mean, he was on Social Security, enjoyed the conversation with the people on the weekends. The town of Smyrna, which I was born and raised in, I plan on retiring in, was told to build a brick fruit stand, okay? I guess it's 1,500, 1,400 square foot. Then he was told he had to put a sprinkler system in it. You think sprinkler system, all $3,000. No, original estimate was $42,000. He got it down to $33,000. I talked to the gentleman the other day. He said, well, I have to pay a $450 a year monitoring fee for this sprinkler system to an outside agency, not a codes department, an outside agency. He said, I had to also run another water line. He said, I pay consolidated for another water line. I don't even use an ounce of water. It's another $35. I mean, this is somebody just selling a few cantaloupes and peaches. I mean, it's just ridiculous that I'm even sharing this. You know, I wish this was something I could, talk about San Francisco or New York, but it's not. It's my community. It's my hometown. The Omni Hut, Gary Farley's, and Gary, I appreciate your help. We met with Gary West, and Gary West is very passionate, the state fire marshal, very passionate about fire safety, but he comes from a fire background, naturally, okay? And I've often quoted Harry Gill, often where you stand is from where you sit. And there's no doubt that in your field, that's where you're going to look at. The home builders are going to look at their bottom line, but that bottom line also is just turned over to the consumer. If it's $6,000, that's $6,000 more that consumer is going to pay. That family is going to pay. I just, with the Omni Hut situation over there, and everybody, I guess, is familiar with Omni Hut. It's been an icon here in Rutherford County, Smyrna, as well as state Tennessee. To be told after 50 years you've got to knock out both ends of your building, put emergency exits in, spray flame retardant on the wall. This is a true story now. Spray flame on the wall, and get permits to put a candle on the table. That's what her initial conversation was. She had the little candles. If you've ever been in the Omni Hut, you had to get a permit to put a candle on the table. She's like, where do I get a permit at? The state finally did work with her. She put in one door, still had to do the flame retardant on the wall. Okay, here's somebody that's already struggling with her tax assessment going up, Kroger closing up across the street, Jack in the Box closing up. Then she's told her property's worth more. She's struggling, the little fruit stand struggling. You see this kind of stuff go on in our culture, and people think, well, these home builders can afford that. That fruit stand owner can afford that. The Omni Hut, they've been there for years. They can afford that. Well, sometimes they can't afford it. That's why we're seeing places close up. If Jack in the Box was successful, they'd still be pumping out burgers over there. If Kroger was going to be successful, they'd still be selling groceries over there. There's a reason they closed up. House Bill 2639 that I spoke about a few months ago, that was sponsored by Senator Jim Tracy and Representative Eric Watson. And that bill addresses the sprinkler system. My understanding of that, and Doug, you're welcome to correct me, or your counselor's welcome to correct me, that basically puts the authority in the county commission's hands by 2/3 majority. If you feel like it's warranted for sprinkler systems for a development, then you have that decision to make. You're elected, you're held accountable to your constituents. The planning committee members, with all due respect, they're not held accountable to the voters. The county commissioners are. I think these regs need to be just re-looked at. I think everybody in this room is all about fire safety. Is there anybody in here against fire safety? I don't think there is. But why not put a committee together to just study this? A diverse group, maybe Larry or someone with that background, the home builders, the realtors, other folks that could come together and look at where we're going as a county. The cities are annexing more property. After next year, they're going to annex more property, I would say, after this House Bill 475, the moratorium gets over with. That's less coverage that the county has to cover, and I know you would argue, well, there's more homes, and that's true, but you'd also have more efficiencies. I say look at some of these trucks. Look at public service announcement. We've got Channel 3, and here in the Murfreesboro and Smyrna, you've got Channel 10, you've got Channel 19. Brian Robertson can put those things together. It doesn't cost you anything. But I wanted to cite TASSER's report, TASSER, Tennessee Advisory Council on Intergovernment Relations. That report shows, and I have the report here, if not, if you just Googled TASSER, Tennessee and TASSER, just to quote TASSER real quick, The report discusses a 2011 University of Tennessee study of fire deaths by census tract that found 90% of census tracts in Tennessee at highest risk for fire deaths are rural tracts characterized by high poverty, low education levels, low incomes, low housing values, and a large number of mobile homes. The report had already begun to target those high-risk areas in an attempt to reduce fire deaths, focusing largely on methods other than fire suppression, like distributing smoke detectors, supporting public fire safety education, and better data collection to help identify future strategies. I think I'd pulled up something, it looked like we had about 90 fire deaths across the state of Tennessee. Larry, correct me if I'm wrong. That's one too many. We'd all argue that's one too many. This 5,000 or this 33,000 with that fruit stand, I don't know how they stay in business with that right there. All that's doing, all these home builders, they're businessmen, they're just going to pass the cost on. The man who installed his sprinkler system, that was your choice. You know, if the consumer wants that choice and they want that added protection, if they feel it's protection, I would add it. Okay, talked to a gentleman today who lost his home during the tornado. Talked to him today, making some T-shirts for me, and we just started talking about this. He said, my wife didn't want to move back into that home. She was so scared unless she had a tornado shelter. He said, so I spent $8,000 on a tornado shelter. That was his choice. He said, it's a closet. He's just got it, this closet for him. But at least he's probably still married because he built that today. If not, he may not have been married. So that's where he justified the cost. But I have the utmost respect for this body, and I know that y'all do care about this, but think about the cost that's going to be incurred. But before I close real quick, and sorry, Chairman, for going over the 3 minutes, I wanted to ask real quick, who has sprinkler systems in their home? Who has sprinkler systems? Okay. This gentleman does. Are y'all both in the industry? Do y'all install sprinkler systems? Okay. Okay, retired firefighters. Okay. Chairman Farley doesn't have a sprinkler system. Larry Farley doesn't have a sprinkler system. Nobody on this committee has a sprinkler system. David, with all due respect, do you have a sprinkler system? You don't. Okay. That's your choice. I mean, I think if it's that severe, Larry would have a sprinkler system. Gary Farley would have a sprinkler system. The two guys in this county that I respect the most when it comes to fire safety are these two gentlemen in front of me. Yet you don't have a sprinkler system. You know, I don't have a sprinkler system in my home. You know, I do have smoke detectors. And I'll cite my wife's grandmother. It's 90 years old, raised several kids, raised several grandkids, helping to raise mother, great-grandchildren. She didn't have a sprinkler system. She didn't have a fire hydrant. Never had a fire, thank God. But if some of these requirements were there, she may not have been able to have that home, be able to afford that home after her husband died back in the 60s with a heart attack and raise those kids by herself. We got to think about these costs and where these things are going. Excessive mandates, excessive regulation, the consumer ends up paying for it, folks. It's not these developers, not these homeowners. It's the consumer. Just like that gentleman that called me today. He wasn't a home builder. He was an individual. He worked for the county, too. He said when it was all said and done, after his impact fee of $37.50, the other fee of $1.20 a square foot that was heated and cooled, another dollar something of covered square footage, it was $11,000 in just permitting fees and sprinkler system. A lot of folks don't have that kind of money to afford especially their first home, you know. But thank you for listening to me, and appreciate your time.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. I'm familiar with the Chockley and the building you're talking about.
Ma'am.
And if I remember right, they made a construction change, which is what caused them to need those sprinklers. They went from having windows and single, one-man doors on the front to adding garage doors. So if they should sell that property in the future, it could be used for another use. It could be automotive use or something else because of the zoning that they got. So if I'm remembering right, that was the reason for the change on that. And
well,
I'm not defending regulation.
Oh, exactly.
I'm not defending, I'm just saying, I just want to make sure that we tell the full story.
Well, I think the story that I see, and anybody, and I welcome everyone to go over there and look at that and go buy some fruit from those folks. They're hurting, by the way, after spending $33,000 on a sprinkler system. They got two large garage doors there, two big 3.0 doors. I mean, I don't understand. That is just crazy. It's asinine. And I'll tell you what, I'm willing to debate that issue with anybody, anywhere, any committee. it's sad where things are going. And the Omni Hut, you know, and I won't get into some other examples that I can see because I can keep you, Chairman, for another hour on some of these things. Some of these regulations, they just need to be looked at. It's just not common sense anymore. You know, I know, Commissioner Allen, you run a business, and I have a lot of respect for you. I have a lot of respect for your husband, and I know you know how hard it's got to be. Anybody that's running a business today, it's challenging, but it's going to get even more challenging when we put requirements like this on folks, especially with tax increase, especially our community. We've got a tax increase, got a county tax increase, with all due respect to the county commissioners. In the next few years, it's going to be harder and harder. You know, that's why my friend had to call it quits. I know he just, after 10 years, he just shut his business down. You know, he just couldn't do it.
The second question I want to ask you is, you know, we talked about if we take the sprinklers out, then the suggestion has been made that then we should eliminate the need for fire hydrants as well.
Well, I think that's where I'm suggesting just an ad hoc committee or a task force to look at it. Look at the issues that you're dealing with. Maybe those subdivision regulations need to be repealed. Maybe they just need to be revamped. But have folks that can be brought to the table that understand everything. Insurance folks that can say, yes, your insurance premium is going to go to this. Or that tanker truck, like that gentleman said. Maybe the county can look at funding some of that. And I know the counties are always going to be strapped on funding. I see the comptroller's report, and the counties are going to have some severe financial headaches in the next few years. It's not just Rutherford County; it's the counties across the state of Tennessee. But I think that to me is something that ought to be looked at.
The only other thing that I would add to that, and this was just a thought that occurred to me, is everybody in the county now talks about how development should pay for itself, and it doesn't. We all know that it doesn't, and so if you pass that cost on to the taxpayers to fund the tankers, then you're kind of subsidizing the builders, because that development they're not paying for themselves in terms of that fire protection unless you were to set up a special, you know, fire code. And I just want to hear your thoughts on this. I just want to make sure
I think
we're
going
looking at it
back
from every angle.
When I first got on the county commission, something that was a hot topic was a development fee that was charged $1,500. Just like this gentleman paid $3,750 for his impact fee for his home. You know, I don't know if you could say if it warranted that much of an impact, $3,750, and that was another county that was very excessive. You know, it was $1,500 increase. You know, I don't know if that's going to cover it. I mean, you know, you look at folks that may not have kids in the school system. What about those that homeschool their children? I don't know if that $1,500 justifies it. In some ways it does, in some ways it doesn't. You know, I don't have children in the school system anymore. I'd say 10 years ago, yeah, if I built a home, the 15, it wouldn't have paid for itself. But you also look at those home transactions that you know, many of us have raised kids here. We've owned several homes. We've paid several taxes several times with the transition of moving in and out of those homes. You know, that can always be debated if growth pays for itself. That growth has also funded a lot of good things in this county, and I don't know how much it's helped the volunteer fire departments, but I know those development fee has helped a tremendous amount. Yeah, thank you.
Mike, I've got just two yes or no answers. Do you think that the county should require fire hydrants in new subdivisions?
I think just relook at this. I mean, if tasks are
yes or no. I just want your opinion.
Have y'all read Tasser's report?
Your position.
Have you read Tasser's report?
I know we've had fire hydrants in this subdivision.
So you haven't read that report? That's the ultimate source of Tennessee Advisory of Intergovernment Relations. That should have been read by everyone on this committee. I can't give a yes or no because everyone should read that report, and I'd give that a yes.
In lieu of fire hydrants, where adequate pressure doesn't exist, should we allow sprinklers as a substitute?
I don't know if sprinkler systems save lives. I mean, how's it going to save a life at that fruit stand? After $40,000,
we're talking about property and lives here.
Well, let's look at that. How much property damage is caused?
Fire ratings here. it's
that
more
needs
than-
to be. I think that's where I'm saying the committee, an ad hoc committee, or a task force, where you bring folks to the table and discuss this. Proverbs says there's wisdom in the multitude of counselors. I don't think anybody would disagree that bringing experts to the table and discussing these things doesn't make good sense. But I'm disappointed if people on this committee hasn't read Tasser's report. That everyone needs to study that. Every county commissioner needs to study that, and maybe Commissioner Farley, chomping at the bit, wants to probably come up here and speak too about it. But study that report, and just all you have to do is Google it or Bing it, and Tasser, Tennessee, and you'll read that report. But 99 deaths in the state of Tennessee in a year and a half, that's one too many. Yes, we can do better. I just don't know if sprinkler systems is the answer. Okay. Thank y'all.
Chairman Phillips, can I just say one thing? That was one of the questions that I asked Fire Chief Farley over here about exactly how many tankers does the county have, and he says they have 5 tankers. Is that correct?
There's 4 on the north side and one out the very southeast.
I was just curious how much, how many tankers we had to cover this whole county. So, and he said he's trying to get the county to buy him more. So.
Anyone else? Evening.
Good evening. My name's Randy Safer. I'm the Southern Regional Director for the National Fire Protection Association. Before going to work for the NFPA, I was in the fire service for almost 30 years. Tennessee is one of my states. I live in Sumner County, and I do have a sprinkler system in my house, and you do get a break in your insurance. And the cost is very different between a commercial system, what Representative Sparks was speaking about with the fruit stand and some of the other buildings, and a residential system. The NFPA, we've been around since 1896. We have over 115 years of keeping records of fires and fire losses. And you can go on our website, nfpa.org, and you can look up Tennessee specifically with fire deaths in Tennessee. Today we have about 300 different codes and standards that cover just a wide variety of different issues that come up, from building and fire codes to electrical safety to firefighter equipment and gear and electrical vehicle fires, and just the list goes on and on and on, hazardous materials. And in 1896, our first standard that we produced was a sprinkler standard. And people say there were sprinklers in 1896. Yeah, there were. They were developed about mid-1870s. And over a few years, they started putting these in to protect the buildings in up and mainly in the Northeast in these big textile factories, because they knew if their textile factory burned down, then a lot of people in town would lose their jobs, so on and so forth. And they developed these sprinkler systems, started putting them in there. Well, they realized that after a number of years, people would put them in differently. They'd have different type of pipe, different type of threads, different types of sprinkler heads, different types of water supplies and everything. So people got together from the insurance companies, from fire service, and the plumbers, and the owners of the factories, and they wrote the sprinkler standard, which today is NFPA 13. And our residential sprinkler standard is NFPA 13D. I have copies of it. I brought a couple tonight. If anyone on the commission would like a copy of that, I'd be happy to provide you with one. Like I said, we're a nonprofit organization. We're not a special interest group. We're about saving lives and property. And there are 3 main reasons why we have so many fires in our country and in Tennessee. It's men, women, and children. It doesn't matter what the code, it doesn't matter when the house was built. The reason why there's more fires in older houses is because there's a lot more older houses than there are new houses. And every new house being built today is eventually going to be an old house. And most of the people that are a lot of the people that are moving into these new houses, and if they can do whatever they want to when they're constructing it, where it doesn't meet the code requirements, doesn't meet a lot of other requirements, And then they're going to do things to it over the year that's not going to meet the code requirements. And somebody else is going to buy this house not knowing what they're getting, what's behind the walls, what holes have been punched here and there to run a new wire or new plumbing system or something like that. And it was mentioned earlier, I think it was Mr. Swanson said that the smoke detectors should be put in older homes. And the State Fire Marshal's Office in Tennessee has a program. They give away these free smoke alarms, and they're putting them all over the state of Tennessee. In Tennessee, nationwide, we lose between 2,500 and 3,000 people a year in fires, in home fires. Tennessee is always in the top 10 in fire loss in this country. And like I said, 3 of the reasons why are men, women, and children. But if you live in Tennessee, you're twice as likely to die in a fire than if you live in the general population of the United States. We have, I've heard sprinklers don't save lives. Sprinklers do save lives. We have over 115 years of documentation. It saves lives, they save property. They reduce property loss by over 70%. They save lives. The contractor who put the sprinkler system in my house, I had my house retrofitted. I live in a rural area in Sumner County. I have a fire hydrant just a couple of hundred feet from my house, but I travel a lot. And I have my wife and daughter at home, and I know my volunteer company. They do the best they can do with what they have, but they have several miles to go to get to my house. And if it catches on fire, even though there's a fire hydrant right up the road, I know there's going to be a danger to my wife and my daughter in that house. And I sleep a lot, like Mr. Garbler said, I sleep a lot better at night, especially when I'm away from home, knowing that my family is protected by a sprinkler system. And my power went out this morning. I didn't have to reset my sprinkler. It runs off the water system. The White House water supply, who it runs off of. And there's a couple other things I wanted to touch about the cost. The contractor who put the system in my house, they do a lot of work in new construction in Middle Tennessee, and they said in new construction, they're installing these sprinkler systems for a little over $1 per square foot. I think they said the average between $1 and $1.10 per square foot. In West Tennessee, there are a number of communities in Tennessee that require residential sprinklers to be installed in new 1- and 2-family dwellings. See, this is not, it's been in our code since 2006, in new construction. You don't have to go back and do your old homes. It's in new construction. That's all we're talking about here. And the side-by-side room, it was mentioned that, where there were small rooms and the fire, wasn't realistic in a home today. Well, our studies show, and Underwriters Laboratory did a study too, that fires today and today's floor plans and the contents of the houses today burn faster, they burn hotter, they have more toxic fumes and gases in the air, and you're right. It probably could have been more realistic. If it was more realistic, that side-by-side burn they did the other day, if it was more realistic, it would have been worse. It would have been hotter, and it would have spread faster. With the floor plans and everything today, that's just the way the homes are built, and it's open. Back in the 70s and the studies, when homes were built back then, the homes were more compact. There were hallways and individual rooms, and they were smaller. And the homes today, the studies you all did, from materials back then that you used to put in your house back when I was a kid growing up or a teenager, it took 17 minutes to reach flashover. Today, with contents in today's homes, it just takes a matter of a few minutes. And another issue, too, is firefighter safety. Lightweight construction is very dangerous. It's very good. It goes up faster. It's strong. It's really strong until you put a match to it or until it catches fire. It burns and collapses very quickly, and it is very dangerous. We lost a firefighter in southern Tennessee just several years ago. Lightweight construction. He crawled into the house in the middle of the night. He didn't know there was a walkout basement. He crawled in, the floor collapsed. Young man, I believe he was in his early 20s, mid-20s, left behind a wife and I think a small child. And like I said, in Tennessee, what we've seen nationwide, smoke alarms they do a good job. But working with fire sprinklers, you increase your chance by living up over 80% in a home fire. And you see a graph, and you see the fires over the last 30 years, they've gone down. And it's a number of reasons. Smoke alarms is one of them. Code enforcement is another one. And a number of other reasons. But if you look at the last so many years, it's been like this. It's staying between 2,500 and 3,000 people a year. We're the most industrialized nation in the world, and we lose 2,500 to 3,000 people a year. What if we lost 200 people to a flu, a swine flu? The media would just be rampant. They'd be going crazy. We'd all have to go get shots tomorrow and everything else. We lose. Tennessee, like I said, is always, I've lived here for over 20 years, and we've always been in the top in the country in fire deaths. And the vast majority of these fire deaths occur in the home. And just a couple of other things. It was mentioned on tornadoes, and I'm very thankful I have a basement on my house. So that's another thing that makes me feel safe and for my family. But I think that y'all heard in the previous meeting that there were 103 people that died in tornadoes in Tennessee over the last 5 years. Well, in fires, there's been almost 600 people in Tennessee die over the last 5 years. There have been 62, I think, this year alone. And we're on record to really surpass what happened if it continues like it is. And I guarantee you, remember I told you this fall, when we have some cold fronts blow in, when we have some cold fronts come in, the first few cold nights, you're going to read about or hear on the news there were some fire deaths. And they're going to be, more than likely, they're going to be in a residential occupancy. Sprinklers do more than just save lives, too. They protect the property from destruction, and it means a family that survives a fire. I've known, we have documented reports, people have had a house fire, one sprinkler goes off. 90% of the time when there's a fire in a sprinkler building, one sprinkler contains the fire. It gives time for the occupants to get out. Young people and old people are the ones who are most affected by fire. Old people sometimes can't hear the smoke alarms. Young people, there's studies that show the young people 16 and under sleep right through the smoke alarms. If y'all have small kids, y'all have seen your kids sleep through some stuff that you wonder how in the world are they sleeping through this. And old people, they don't have a chance to get out a lot of times, or handicapped people, or people who may be impaired by alcohol or something else. And a lot of the people, the toxicology reports on a lot of the people who die in home fires, a lot of the adults, they are impaired. They were impaired when they perished, either by alcohol or something else, some prescription drugs or illegal drugs. Smoke detectors help you get out quick. I heard that over and over again tonight too. And yeah, they do help you get out quicker if you can hear it. And I really don't suggest you getting a fire extinguisher and going back in to fight your fire. Leave that up to the professionals. People get hurt, people die every year because they go back in their house to either get the puppy or to try to put the fire out or whatever. Get out and wait for the fire department to get there. Saving lives means more than just preventing fire deaths. You know, I don't know if you've ever, when I was a kid, my house burned down. And man, that was tough. It's more than just, you're losing more than your house. You're losing a lot of memories. You're losing a lot of valuable. It's not the furniture it wasn't a house. It was the photos of my grandfather that came over here from Croatia back in 1909 that we lost. And some other things that were very special to all of us. Just as there is no other fire safety technology in the world that produces a greater reduction in the risk of fire deaths as sprinklers. And one thing I'd like to say in closing is, when I put a new patio in my house last year, I called the professional who does the patios, the guy that designs patios, come out and shoot the grade, say you need to, recommend this and recommend that. What do you like, this and that? Same thing. If I'm going to build a house, I'm going to talk to my designer. I'm going to talk to my home builder. You know why? Because they're the experts. When it comes to life safety issues, whether it's residential, commercial, whatever, any kind of life safety issues, I'm going to talk to the guy in the uniform right there, or the woman in the uniform, or the people, because they know what they're talking about. They're the experts, and they're the ones that are shooting you. They're telling you the truth, and they've seen it firsthand many times. And I'm telling you, one of the most devastating things that can happen to a family, not just obviously to lose a loved one, but to lose your home. I was going to say earlier, we have a lot of cases where people have had fires in home and sprinklered homes. One sprinkler goes off, puts the fire out. They close the door to the room. They get to move back in there that night. Fire department comes, vacuums the water up, and the sprinkler system uses 10 times less water to put the fire out than a fire hose does. I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for letting us come up here and speak to you tonight.
I'm Gary Farley, County Commissioner, District 7, 659 Calvary Court. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I wanted to clarify something that Representative Sparks had spoke of, the TASER report. And again, I have a lot of respect for him as well. Served on the county commission with him, and we worked together at the state level also. The TASER report, additional ways to reduce fire losses. This is on page 12. Other than firefighting, there are other measures to address fire protection and reduce fire deaths, like building codes, sprinklers, smoke alarms, and public education and outreach of fire safety. All these methods address fire protection and are underscored by the following rule. Every community shall tailor its fire service to meet its needs. Every community shall tailor its fire service to meet its needs. And I think it's what this planning commission is doing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission, and staff. My name is Wayne Wagner. I'm the Executive Director for the Tennessee Fire Sprinkler Contractors Association. I have 39 years in the fire service, 14 and a half as a fire marshal, 3 and a half as a fire chief. I've been a proponent of residential sprinklers since 1984, working with a group from Scottsdale, Arizona, trying to develop their ordinance. And we're working on that in Knox County, Tennessee, where I was the fire marshal and the fire chief. Unfortunately, back there, the information that was given out is a whole lot like the same myths that have been talked about tonight about sprinklers. Now, I'm not going to talk about adopting a code or the standard here, but I've heard a lot of neat things tonight that has got me to think, especially about the way you want to do your development stuff. And I want to thank Mr. Mossy for allowing us to submit our comments back to you back in May, and those are still on record, I'm sure, and I'm not going to go into all that. My colleague and Randy Safer and Tim Travers from the NFPA submitted some information back to you. Representatives, I'm all with you. I think a task group ought to be put together, and I think we ought to sit around the table and talk about this. I teach in a group called Fire Team USA. We've been in 47 states around the country. We were in Indianapolis last Monday, and that's what we talk about. You put a group together, and then we talk about when we come to this group here, this should be no decision this group should have to the toil over is to say, hey, this is a good thing for our community, and let's do the right thing, and whether it be mandate sprinklers, hydrants, or smoke alarms. I first off want to say, I am not an advocate for pulling any part of that fire protection out of the total package. I think you got to have early warning, you got to have early suppression, and you got to have a plan. You got to know what you're going to do when you get out of that house. We teach in public education, get out, have a meeting place, count noses, call 911, and have the fire department respond. As Randy just said, don't go back in. Whatever you do. We just lost 4 people in upper Tennessee, middle Tennessee, back in May for 2 people were in the house, and the 2 neighbors went in to get them out. All 4 perished. You know, some of the questions that was asked, I want to try to answer those very quickly for you because, again, I think if you put a task group together, we can bring all this together. But first off, well, I'll get to that in just a second. Anyway, life safety, smoke alarms, again, as I say, we teach a part in Fire Team USA is the response to smoke alarms by young children and even now some of the older. I got a 30-year-old son that has no idea when a smoke alarm goes off. You know, he lived up with us till he's about 23. Thank God he bought his own house and he moved out. I don't have to worry about that, but I can go in and push the smoke alarm, do our drills like we do monthly, like we advocate in the fire service, and he wouldn't move. We've done studies in Nashville, done studies in Boston, studies in Dallas, Several communities have done studies on what do we do when we have a response of a smoke alarm to a young child or even an older person trying to get out of the houses. And I don't disagree with you. Early warning is good. If we're, can get up and move out of that house, it's the greatest thing because it's going to get you out before the sprinkler system operates. We think that thing operates somewhere between 30 and 38 seconds, where the sprinkler is going to operate somewhere in between a minute and a half, regardless of what you've seen in our side-by-side or in the houses. I can promise you those sprinkler heads react almost in the same time frame. And I am willing, if we can find a house in Middle Tennessee and you folks are willing to come, and I want to answer questions, if you're willing to come and witness a test and a full-scale test, we'll find somebody to fund it. I can promise you to do that just to show you that regardless of what we do on the side, and the only reason we do the side-by-sides at 8x8 because we spent $1,000 on a demonstration Monday. The Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition donated it to Chief Farley, and unfortunately we didn't have a lot of our home building friends show up to see that, and I wish we would have. We could have answered a lot of these questions. Talk about water line, pressure, water distribution. I heard that question about you got to have so much water to make the umbrella work. You're absolutely correct. In commercial, you got to have 36-inch wall wetting. Residential, you got to have 24-inch wall wetting. That could be happening, and the water pressure, the heads that we have out there right now, 26 gallons a minute, 20 PSI. That's pretty much normal. We have 7 PSI heads that work. They still have the same water wetting capability. I can promise you on a 2-inch line running into a subdivision, we can sprinkle a house and it will work adequately. That's why the sprinkler contractors do their hydraulic calculation and their designs that goes into the homes, okay? That's what they do. They're good at that. I don't do design, I do hydraulics, okay? I ran a fire apparatus for years, and it was all I could do to count how many gallons per minute we were putting out of the fire truck. Cost, water backflow prevention, inspections. We're going to have a little meeting with the utility district, and I want to talk about backflow prevention. Because on a multi-purpose system that can be installed in accordance with 13D, you got water flowing through the system all the time, so you really don't need backflow prevention, so we won't work on that. On a standalone, we got jurisdiction in the state of Tennessee that's using the single swing rubber face check valve because in the plastic pipe there's not enough data to ever tell us that we've got any kind of contamination inside that system, and we want to bring that out to you. The real estate folks, look, I'm very close to some real estate folks, and we talk about this a lot, about mandating sprinklers. You know, it's really hard for our legislative friends to understand this, I think. We're not mandating sprinklers. Sprinklers are a part of the building code, the fire code, and the International Residential Code. They have been put in by consensus standard making process. They have been voted on by the committee at the ICC and the IRC, and they have been produced as a document, which I have and will still continue to say that if you start pulling portions of that code out, you're building substandard housing. Install attic space and other places. Yeah, there's places we exempt sprinklers from in homes. The reason for that is for the NFPA. Dr. John Hall's office has told us where fires start that kill people. They don't start in the garage. They don't start on the porch. They don't start in the crawl space. That's that we don't habitate. That's why we don't put sprinklers in there. These are life safety systems. They're not property preservation systems. Totally different from the concept of commercial sprinklers. Power outages, yeah, I'm not going to defend that one. You could have that happen. But what happens when you have a power outage and your toilet freezes up or your water spigots freeze up? It's the same difference, okay? That's the way I see by that. Hit that. We've tried to do classes in Rutherford County here with the Fire Marshal Ken Honeycutt. And, of course, full disclosure, Ken and I have been friends since 1980. And I've done a lot of work with the Murfreesboro Fire Department. I'm doing fire team here and having sprinkler classes, and we would come back and do that. I would love to do that for this group. And if the folks would come in and sit and listen and then have questions and debate, that's what this is all about. Because we like to hear those questions so we can have answers for them in the future. ISO was a question that was asked about the insurance services offices. ISO has changed their philosophy in the last year. It went into effect July the 1st. One of the biggest considerations going to be given in ISO is fire prevention and water supply. So those are two things that y'all need to consider because, and I think you have, because with the advent of a residential sprinkler system in a subdivision, that water supply is not counted against your fire department. So, and that's why in the fire code or in the residential code, if you fully sprinkle a subdivision, the water purveyor can actually cut his water supply by 50%. So there's lots of trade-ups have been built into the code to make it affordable for the home builder. Because look, I understand what you're going through. I'm not up here advocating to put something in a home and make a home unaffordable. But we just didn't fall off the wagon last week in the sprinkler industry. We've done our calculations too through mortgage companies, 30 years, 15 years, and we found out that with a 2,000 square foot house, and I know my contractors that's in Middle Tennessee that does residential, as was brought up a minute ago, does it anywhere from $1 to $1.25 a square foot. You take a 2,000, 2,500 square foot house, working with the water purveyor to keep the cost as low as we can, somewhere between $7 and $9 a month is what it costs on a mortgage. And you guys in the home building industry figure that stuff all the time. We did that to make a point to say that we don't make housing unaffordable when you put a sprinkler system in your home. I'm going to reiterate what Randy just said with firefighter safety, because I think that's something you got to take in consideration, especially with the volunteer fire service and even with the career fire service. We kill, on average, around 110 firefighters a year in this country. You know, this year's going to be pretty big because we killed 19 in a forest fire. Nothing we could have done about that with the sprinkler issue, but there's going to be a bigger number this year. But when you start putting some of the construction features in homes, which we're not against, by no means, it makes homes more affordable, easier to build, faster to build, but lightweight construction does collapse. The young man that Randy just brought up down in South Tennessee, that fire burnt, and they think about, by the time they estimated response time and the call in and all that, burnt less than 11 minutes. They went up, got their infrared camera to go in the door. They found out the carpet and the padding masked the heat coming through the floor. They went in the door, fell right in the basement. Sean Daugherty lost his life, 24 years old. The no deaths with interconnected smoke alarms, I would like for you to go back and research that, because I think that information is incorrect also. I think Chief West at the Fire Marshal's office can verify that for you. Again, I want you to consider the firefighters that's fighting the fires in your community. And I heard tanker brought up, and God bless your heart for being a volunteer firefighter doing the tanker shuttle. I was a fire chief in the fire department in Knox County. It ran 14 stations. 10 of those stations had tankers. We could deliver around 12,000 gallons a minute on a tanker shuttle if it didn't snow, if it didn't ice or sleet, or a tanker didn't break down, or for some reason the guy that was supposed to drive the tanker didn't get sick. You can't depend on those mechanical parts of that to do everything that I think that they were asking you to do tonight. Because it takes, especially in Chief Farley's predicament here with minimum staffing, that if he's depending on a tanker to show up, that it may not show up. More people are living in homes now. I brought that up. I heard, I think our representatives talk about there might be 2 or 3 families living there. Then that's even a bigger reason to sprinkle houses, because now we're protecting more people in those homes. And I just don't want us to mix and match residential versus commercial, because, Representative, I'm going to tell you, I'm a huge advocate of getting that cost down on those commercial systems. But I'm also a huge advocate of code enforcement. And for every one of those doors that somebody's had to put in one of those buildings, somebody had to die to get that door in the building. I've got a personal friend, Rob Feeney, from Boston, Massachusetts, that lost his fiancee in the station nightclub fire. The only reason he didn't die is 20 people fell on top of him and kept him from burning up. He died within 6 feet of the door, and there was plenty of exits in that building. Unfortunately, the fire loading inside that building was so tremendous, it took less than 15 minutes for it to burn. We spent a lot of money over the years to figure out what human reaction to fire is, and we still don't know what human reaction to fire is. I promise you, go home tonight, that smoke alarm will go off at 2 o'clock in the morning. I know exactly what you're going to do. You're going to get up and go look for the fire. If the security alarm went off there, what you're going to do? You'll call 911. So you're not going to go around chasing the fire, and then you're going to run into an issue, because like we showed at the side-by-side burn, in a minute 41 seconds, we had flashover. It's that quick inside of a single home with the upholstery and stuff that we have in there. Again, affordability, the technical committee that developed NFPA 13D, my contractors that I work with all the time, and I hammer on this, is that it has to be affordable. It has to be installed in a timely fashion, and we have to work with the home building industry. I'll be quite frank with you, home builders. I'm tired of the fight. I want to figure out a way for us to work together to make this as a life safety issue in the state of Tennessee, because we are number one in the country right now, by the way, for fire fatalities, and we're going to probably end up that way, which is, well, I won't say that. But anyway, I think we need to work together, and I'm willing to work together with you guys and gals to make fire sprinklers affordable and easily installed and not such a bad word, because I truly believe in them from a fire department's perspective. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
I just have one question, and I've had this question for a while regarding sprinklers, and you seem like the guy to ask. If there's a fire that, let's say, I know you said it typically doesn't originate outside the home, but let's say, for example, it got struck by lightning or something, and this house is on fire, and maybe it's going to jump to the next house. If both of those homes have sprinklers, at what point will that family be warned if it's jumping rooftop to rooftop?
Well, again, these are property or life safety systems, not property preservation. That's why we don't sprinkle the attics. So if you had an attic fire from a lightning strike, and this has happened in sprinkled homes, we've had a couple of different cases, scenario. Number one is that the fire burns the roof off, the one gets into the house, and then from radiant heat next door, it sets the house on fire next door. Hopefully the smoke alarms are working, and that the smoke alarms will awake those folks and get them out of the house, or if it catches the roof on fire. Now, we've had this happen with domestic water before, especially if you use copper or PEX or whatever, that the PEX line will blister, blow out, and then spray water in the attic and basically put the fire out. So if we don't protect those parts of the property, because those are not where people have fires that die. Now, statistically, we can get you all that information. Dr. Hall, I think, is like less than 2% in those type of fires. But that's, again, why we don't ever reduce our fire forces, because that's what they're going to do. When they get there, hopefully somebody's dialing 911, the fire department's en route, and they can get there and at least hold it off, at least maybe the second house of origin. So that's a great question, but the sprinklers that we're talking about with 13D doesn't fix that problem. Now, we've got jurisdictions that go, God, please let me sprinkle the garage. Please let me sprinkle the attic. If you got the political clout to make that happen, I say make it happen. But first off, you're going to make it a lot more expensive to put a sprinkler system in a home if you're going to try to put a dry system in the attic, or if you're going to try to sprinkle someplace else to capture that kind of fire. What we're looking at is where are the rooms of origin, which happens to be living room 1, bedroom 2, kitchen is 3, and then others are 4. And that's why we sprinkle those particular areas with fast response residential heads. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. It took a little longer than I wanted to.
I see Mr. Robinson coming up, and I also see some folks getting up and leaving. Jake, we're going to take about a 5-minute break, okay? Is that okay with you? Planning Commission now is back in session, and if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Jake Robertson was on his way up. Jake, if you would come forward, please. Your turn. Yes, sir.
Jake Robinson, 5128 MacArthur here in Murfreesboro. I'm confused now about this whole situation. First, I thought that we were doing the sprinkler systems for safety, to actually save lives. And then I heard somebody say, no, we're not actually doing that. It's more about saving it's about having fire protection when you don't have a fire hydrant. And I think Mike, you was asking Representative Sparks if he would yes or no on not having fire hydrants. You're actually advocating for that, if you think about it. If you say, well, if you don't have a fire hydrant, we'll let them have a sprinkler system. Is that not?
Only if we are allowing sprinkler systems.
Okay.
Areas where adequate water is not there to support a fire hydrant. We're not requiring them anywhere. We're just allowing them as a substitute for fire hydrants. That's all we're doing. We're not requiring them anywhere.
If we had
and it allows an individual, in an area to develop his property into a major subdivision that otherwise would not be allowed to be developed and would not have been for a number of years in this county.
I understand that. That does seem appealing if you're a building contractor. I'm not, so I don't know what goes in behind their decision to go forward with that. Some of the questions this brought up for me, and maybe this will be some of the questions that would, if you convene an ad hoc committee to study this, is it better to have a fire hydrant in front of your house, or is it better to have a sprinkler system? If you're going to choose between the two, which one would you choose?
A hydrant every time.
Okay.
Because the hydrants are required if there's sufficient water pressure.
Okay.
You can't opt out just because you feel like doing the sprinkler.
Okay, and that kind of goes to my point. If you have an option, you tend to choose a fire hydrant. But we've been hearing tonight how great a sprinkler system is. It had been described in a couple of different fellow experts. It makes me want to go out and put one in my home. The question is, why don't we require all of our residents to have retrofitted sprinkler systems? It seems like they are almost a mandatory item in order to have proper fire protection. And so again, is the difference between whether you have proper fire protection, having a hydrant or having a sprinkler system versus both. We're advocating for no fire hydrant when we advocate that sprinkler system. Now, I would be behind retrofitting existing households if you give me a tax credit. We just heard an expert say that it takes a lot less water for the fire department to put out a fire. And it does a lot less damage, a lot less cleanup. It's a lot less expensive for the homeowner. If that house burns down, it may not be rebuilt and the county loses that tax revenue. Why wouldn't we incent if it's so important to have a sprinkler system and they do such a great job, why are we only talking about a very small percentage of the households in our county if we're only talking about new houses being built? I don't know how many houses are being built per year now. Do you know that off the top, Doug? Yeah, and that is a very small percentage of our 265,000 house residents here. I don't know how many households that represents in the county, but it would seem to me that if we're going to push this on new homeowners, and we're going to increase the cost to them, and we're not going to give them an option to do it, I agree with Mr. Lane back there. I think it should be a free enterprise option for the homeowner to make that decision. Maybe some kind of waiver system. I don't know. Maybe those are the things that we have to work out. The water tank thing. I don't think a contractor that was going to build a big, like you said, a major subdivision. I don't know what that would be. 250 homes, 500, 400. Okay, but a major subdivision. I think of the subdivision I live in. It was scheduled for 600 homes. It's got about 350 now. And, of course, it petered out in 2008 when we had to crash, but it's starting to build back again. And I would think, okay, just that one subdivision, I'd be willing to spend an extra $100 on that home to be able to buy that guy a new tanker back there for the fire chief for that area. If it's $25,000 for a tanker. We couldn't buy a used one like that other guy did? That's what I would be looking at. But anyway, you get my point. There are other ways to skin this cat, and to make it and maybe the real decision is whether we should even do it or not. If it really is about fire safety or about human safety, maybe we shouldn't be thinking about allowing optional sprinkler systems in an area, because those folks are less protected, aren't they? If they just have a sprinkler system versus have a fire hydrant. You choose a fire hydrant every time. Maybe we shouldn't be thinking about even allowing that. That might crack down on expansion, and I'm all for expansion, but at the same time, you got to have water. And I think CUD is the people to really be talking to about whether we're going to get water there. So those are some of the questions that make me think. I would love to see a tax credit, though, for retrofit. Why wouldn't we do that? Just a consideration.
Anyone else? See no. Sure.
gentleman from the sprinkler service, sprinkler organization left. I was hoping he could hear this. He mentioned that they're not trying to mandate sprinklers. That's a little bit disingenuous. To give you some background on the code, which I'm intimately familiar with, in the state of Tennessee, prior to the stimulus package pushed by the Obama administration, there was no county code requirement by the state. What happened with stimulus, tied to the stimulus package, in order for you to get those funds, the states were required to adopt statewide building codes. Now, the state went with what was easiest, which is the International Residential Code, which he referenced earlier. That is put together by the International Codes Council, which is a voting, it's a membership voting body. Anybody can go in and pay their membership and vote to get something put in the International Residential Code and the Commercial Code as well. That's what happens. Just like any voting body, there's horse trading that goes on. And I can give you a more recent example, something called arc fault circuit interrupters, which is a circuit breaker. Those got put into the International Residential Code. It took a breaker that normally is about $3, pushed that cost to nearly $25 per breaker. I'm sure all you well know there's probably about 20 breakers in your house at least. The state of Tennessee, though, was pretty wise, and they said, no, we're not going to adopt all of that. What the state of Tennessee said was, instead of adopting all the International Residential Code with regards to those arc fault breakers, they only require them for bedrooms and interconnected smoke detector circuits. So to say that, well, they're not trying to mandate them, it's a little bit disingenuous, because if you can get that injected into the International Residential Code, you know good and full well it's mandated, because the state mandates that you follow the International Residential Code. Now, unless, and you guys correct me, I think each county can do a 2/3 commission vote and reject adopting the state code. Is that correct? Okay. And then I can't remember, does it reset every time you get new members, or does that continue on until you... It really doesn't matter. The point is that to say that, well, we're just getting it in the code, that doesn't mandate it. That's not exactly true unless the state exempts it, which that's what the state has done. So I thought that was a little bit disingenuous there. They are trying to get it mandated.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Anyone else? I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. Let me see if I can kind of bring this back to what we're trying to focus on. There have been a lot of folks that have made suggestions and recommendations and a lot of different things. And our focus is on subdivision regulations. In essence, updating those, but we're really not calling it an update because we're rewriting some of them. So it's really a rewrite. The subdivision regulations, as they are right now, if we don't pass new ones, are still in effect, which means that sprinklers are there. So with the new system, with the new subdivision regulations, or at least this draft copy that we're talking about tonight, I'm thinking that we'll either want to take the sprinkler regulation or ordinance out and or leave it in. And we've heard some arguments both ways. We've also heard, I think, that there are some kind of misunderstandings about this whole process. And it's not about mandating certain things. It's about development of our county as we go forward into the future. And some lands, according to our regulations, our subdivision regulations, are probably not suitable for development without adequate fire protection. And the only means that we have are fire hydrants. And in order to develop that land in the future, this commission has decided to put sprinklers in as an option when fire hydrants are not available. And I think that's what our job is to figure out if that's what we want. The curveball that has been thrown, Josh, now tell me if I'm way off base, but the curveball that's been thrown was someone, I think it was Representative Joe Carr, asked the Attorney General for an opinion on sprinkler systems. And after some meetings and discussion with our county attorney, the subdivision regulations that are now in effect could be amended and not have to worry about this whole idea with sprinklers. But we're doing more than amending those. In essence, this is a draft copy of the new subdivision regulations, which makes the state attorney general's opinion valid and enforceable to us. So our options tonight, and they're very similar, and maybe they have two parts. The Planning Commission, and I want to make sure I don't forget anything, so I might read some of these notes. If the Planning Commission wants to vote on the subdivision regulations as presented, we can do that. However, if they're approved, then the portion dealing with the sprinkler systems as an option in the event of a waiver would simply be void and of no force or effect at this time, as per the Attorney General opinion on page number 3. So we could adopt it like that, knowing that that sprinkler system would be void, and then another motion, the Planning Commission could vote to send section 4C, page 25, the sprinkler system option, on to the County Commission for their consideration, and this would also comply with the Attorney General's opinion. So we could vote for this as is with the sprinkler system in there, knowing that that sprinkler system would be void until the County Commission moved on it. The other option would be just to remove section 4C, page 25, and vote on it without that, and then vote to forward it on to the County Commission. We could do it one of two ways. Both of them would have the exact same effect. Is that correct, Josh?
Jeff, can I ask Doug a question? Doug, have we ever done a subdivision with a sprinkler system in it?
There are some subdivisions with now, let me qualify that, under the ones that I'm familiar with were approved before this regulation took effect. There are some subdivisions that do have sprinkler system requirements that were in there, but it wasn't due to the regulation that we put in the subdivision regulations back in 2009. Some major subdivisions.
And I went to Powell's Chapel and looked. I mean, you know, went out there and looked at the installation and everything. Was that done in lieu of fire hydrants, or was it done because there was not adequate water there for fire hydrants?
My understanding now, and you know, forgive me, I haven't looked into that subdivision in quite a while. My understanding of that, and I'm not sure if anybody from CUD is here, but my understanding of that was that the lines out there could not support hydrants. So the requirement, they basically said you have to put sprinklers in the homes. But again, that was before the 2009 regulation. That subdivision was approved prior to that, is my understanding. Because I remember going out there and seeing one of the installs myself while we were discussing this back in 2008 or whenever that was. Mm-hmm. Right.
Several of
Yes,
us
sir.
went out there and looked. Who said? We said, or the state said, or who said that they could do that subdivision without fire hydrants? And my point being, if we don't pass something, does the state allow it anyway?
Well, yeah, as I recall, they still had to get a fire hydrant waiver, and I think they had said that they were going to put the sprinklers in the home, so that waiver still had to come before the Planning Commission. But again, that was prior to this particular regulation. And again, that's my recollection of that.
Of those two options, if we removed page 25 from the subdivision regulations, then it would have to come back to this body. Is that right, Josh? Have to come back to this body to be adopted?
I think the thinking, and Doug can weigh in on this, but the thinking was if you took out the section of the subdivision regulations that is in question, which is 4C on page 25, and you just took it out and you passed everything else, then that portion dealing with sprinklers would need to go to the county commission separately and be considered by the county commission separately to comply with the AG opinion, that where the AG has opined that any sprinkler requirement like that would need to be considered by the county commission in a separate, distinct resolution that deals with nothing but the sprinklers, and it would have to pass by a 2/3 vote. So if you did that, if you took out 4C and you passed the rest of the subregs, then that separate section would go to the county commission, and assuming for a moment that they approved it, then I think the thinking was that you would probably need to then come back and tweak your subregs a little bit, because that would have been removed. And now it's been approved, and you'd want some reference to that option back into your subregs.
Can we leave it out? And I mean, several people suggested studying the issue. Can we just leave it out? Bring it back up 6 months from now or a year from now or whatever? Do we even have to send it? We don't have to send it at all, do we?
I don't know of any reason you have to send it. I think the Attorney General's opinion is that if it's going to be included, then that would be the methodology for having it passed, instead of you all just passing it in your subregs.
And the subregs, besides that, we just approve ourselves. They don't actually go to the county commission.
Right.
We're at the end of the road for that.
Road. Yep.
What I talked about as far as option number one, if we adopted them as presented, knowing that the sprinkler section would be void until the county commission voted on it, would it then come back to this commission, Josh, for approval, or would, if the county commission approved it, then it would be in effect?
Jeff, do you mean in its entirety? It has to come back. We approve it with the sprinklers. Then is it void, the whole thing void until the county commission deals with the sprinklers, or is the rest of it in effect immediately?
Let Josh answer that, but what I'm thinking is that...
Was that your question?
Yes, just the section, the sprinkler system section would be void until the county commission moved on it. And if they were to have approved it, if they did, then we had already adopted it with that included, so it wouldn't have to come back here again. Is that correct, Josh?
I think that's right. The Attorney General opinion on the third page, numbered paragraph 4, he says that if that type of provision dealing with sprinklers is approved by any method other than 2/3 vote of the county commission, that it's void. All right, just that provision. If you look at page 2, paragraph F of your subregs entitled severability, it specifically says if a single provision in your subregs is found to be unlawful, unenforceable, etc., it does not affect the balance of your subdivision regulations. So with that in mind, I think if you passed it intact as it is, you would be doing it knowing that that waiver portion dealing with sprinklers is not enforceable. It is void, per the AG's opinion, but it would not void the balance of the document.
Could you not pass it contingent upon county commission approval and the whole thing not be adopted until then? And if it failed at the county commission, it'd come back to us and we will live under our old regulations until that point in time?
That's the whole document contingent upon the county commission approving that one.
It said it's
passing.
going to be void if any part of it's illegal.
No. Only that section, then I didn't speak clearly. Only that one section would be void. The balance of the document would be enforced.
No significant change in this document and what we're living under now. I mean, it's all just rewording and stuff. So we're under no timetable to get this passed. I mean, I would hope or think we could pass, this commission could pass it to take effect upon adoption by the county commission, and that way it would all either go into effect or it would all come back to this commission. And we just keep living under current regulations until that point in time, if we were so inclined to do that.
I kind of think that that's probably what we're all talking about. If we were to pass it intact, knowing that the sprinkler section would be void until the county commission moved on it, we could also move that the whole thing would not go into effect until after the county commission had made its decision. And if they could make that decision in September, then we could put an October 1st date on it, something like that, Will.
Probably so much public hearing time. This has to be public hearing in front of the county commission, I take it, be advertised for 30 days or something like that, or I'm asking here, I don't know.
I have a follow-up question to that. Josh?
Yeah.
Based on the AG opinion, is our current reg valid? Is it enforceable?
Yeah, I think it is. I didn't really spend a lot of time researching that, but but our current regulation was enacted prior to this statute. So unless the statute is going to be applied retroactively, then I think the current regulation is enforceable. I can imagine someone raising that question like you are now and maybe even in a court, but I think the answer is yes, it's enforceable.
The county commission limited in their debate to just the sprinkler part of it. The rest of it is our deal. Is that correct?
I think that's right. And I think if it were to go to the county commission, this statute that's being referenced in the AG's opinion, envision that in that resolution that's going to the county commission, it's not this whole document. It's nothing but the portion dealing with the sprinkler. It's a separate item.
And Josh, I was wondering why that portion is pulled out by 2/3 vote. We're not sending this to the state or anything. This is just the words of.
Right. No, you're right. It's a little bit unusual, but I'm guessing, and this is mere speculation, but I'm saying probably some. Some political pressure put to bear on this statute being passed, but the statute itself, this isn't the AG talking. TCA 68-120-101, little a 8A, says a 2/3 vote. So when the state passed that portion of the statute, they envisioned that it would require a 2/3 vote.
Just on this section?
On that, just on sprinklers. Anytime you're creating mandatory sprinkler requirements, 2/3 vote of the legislative body.
Okay. Well, and then another alternative, I guess, is send the whole subdivision regulations to the county commission and approve it all in the same time instead of having to wait and go back and forth and all that sort of stuff. But then it would hinge upon this section being approved by 2/3. But I don't know, this body may not want the county commission to look at it or be aware of it or understand it. I don't know.
Quite frankly, the county commission is not vested with the authority to grant approval on subdivision regulations outside of the sprinkler requirement. Quite frankly, the county commission could vote on it all day, every day, and it would have no impact on whether or not these were actually in effect. That authority lies with you, the planning commission. Again, now the sprinkler regulation is a whole different ballgame, but because of that AG opinion, but the subdivision regulations as a document stop with you. They don't go any further than that.
Getting to be late, and I'm having trouble remembering what we talked about at the start of the meeting, but I do recall talking about the fire hydrants, and as the crow flies and as the truck rolls, and Mr. Vaught asking you to research what neighboring counties are doing and things like that. So I don't know if I'm ready to make a decision on this tonight anyway. If we're going to wait on information on that and try and clarify distance apart on fire hydrants and all, then we need to defer this till we get to the information anyway.
That's separate. It is separate, yes, sir.
That's separate. So I think we're a little premature talking about what we're going, because I'm not ready to pass this tonight because I still ain't got clarification on that one. It's a smaller item, but it's still something worth debate, in my opinion. And we ask you to get information. You haven't had the opportunity in the last 2 hours to do it, I don't believe. And so I think we ought to just defer this to the next meeting and get that information. We can hash that part out and then come back to this, or we can decide what we're going to do about the sprinklers, but I'm still not ready to push the whole thing forward until we've settled the distance on the fire hydrants.
What about
if this is this is splitting hairs, Josh, but if it's in lieu of fire hydrants, then is it a requirement?
Well,
is it a mandate from
yeah.
us? It's an option
Right.
we're offering.
I understand. I
I know
completely
I'm splitting
understand
hairs
what you're
here, but
saying.
I'm just wondering.
It doesn't matter what I think. The Attorney General thinks that it is. And so, my best advice would be to assume that the AG's office is right and that a court would side with the Attorney General. And so it's probably better to treat it that way.
I have a question, Josh. Is there any, since we do have other work we want to do on this, with the research that Doug needs, which it's pretty limited in scope, would it not be advantageous, because the county commission is going to have to vote on this regardless, would it not be advantageous to go ahead and advance this piece to the county commission while we're doing our research? Because if they could give us an answer, then we would know before we vote on our subdivision regulations, or could know whether or not it needs to be in or needs to be out.
Right. Well, whether or not it's advantageous, I'll leave to you all, but I do think because it's separated out, it's an entire, although it's related to the subregs, under this statute, the issue of these sprinklers is a different animal. It's a different sheet of paper. So you could, I think, theoretically make a motion to move send the issue of the sprinklers to the county commission for consideration. Now, whether you do anything with the subregs or not.
Well, if we take the sprinklers out, there's nothing to send to the county commission. That's still an option.
That's true.
I'm not ready to send it to the county commission. I feel sure there's at least a couple of votes here probably that would say, let's just take it out. And if we get enough grief from everybody in the years to come who can't develop their property, and we can back up and look at it all over again. But that's one of the options out there. So. My motion to defer is still out there to the next meeting. He seconded it.
Had a motion to defer in a second. Let me just ask for some clarification. Are we going to have to do another public hearing? If we defer it, will it cause another public hearing? And
I think the only time it's going to require another public hearing is if there's significant changes made. I mean, this document that we're looking at isn't like the zoning ordinance was. When we were looking at that, after you made, and it's a different animal, but when you made your recommendation on that, when it went to the county commission, they could either vote it up or down. They could not make changes. We have a little more latitude with this. We can make certain changes, and if they're not what we would deem substantial changes, I don't think we need another public hearing because we've had this one tonight. Now, if we start changing several things and they're pretty significant changes, I mean, then at that point we have to kind of take a step back and say, wait a minute, do we need to have a public hearing? But if we're not changing anything, then I don't think you have to have another public hearing at that point.
if we're not changing anything, why are we deferring, you guys? I'm just asking you, why are we deferring?
We haven't settled the fire hydrants yet on the distance apart, which he brought up earlier.
What if we took that out tonight and make it just like it was? What I'm trying to do, you guys, we've been working on this thing for I don't know how long, and we've had many work sessions. And what we're talking about now is more work sessions and potentially drawing the public back into it again. We've had a lot of folks here tonight that had a particular say, and I'm just thinking that what purpose are we going to serve by deferring it? You know, what are we going to accomplish as a commission? Will, I'm lost there. So if you could lead me through that, I would feel better about it probably.
I'm just a little worried about changing the wording on the distance between the fire hydrants, and if we would leave it as it said before, 1,000 feet, then I'm okay to go with it, because I haven't thought about it enough to be okay with the as the truck rolls down the road and around corners and different things. I'm leery of change right there.
I'm good to wait. You're asking, so I'm good to wait on an answer. I'm also good to leave it like it is tonight and go ahead and vote on it. So either way, I'm good.
The motion to defer is there.
As it previously was, Either way, I'm good.
We were to change at some future the crow flies and the truck drives. Is that enough? Is that enough, Josh, for us to start all over again?
You mean if you deferred this and you made that change?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't think so. I would not think you would have to start all over again.
Not that I'm opposed to public hearings, but the issue is that I don't want to get into another public hearing and then have other changes and defer it again and again and again. We've talked about this a whole lot, and I think some of our understandings are a little bit more clear. But if we've got a motion to defer and a second, and we'll move on that motion depending on other discussion right now.
Will there be a glitch ordinance so we have the opportunity to address this as the crow flies?
Yes, I mean, there's always that. I mean, quite frankly, you're not going to do a document, this document is a lot shorter than the zoning ordinance, but we know there's already some things in here that are going to have to be tweaked at some point. It's just the nature of these things. They're going to have to be tweaked as we go.
Bill, would that be acceptable to something that you could live with? Address a revision in that part at another date?
Leave it as it previously said, and look at it later. I can do that. We may look at it in 2 months or 3 months, but I'd rather hash it out and have more time to think about it, because that's the first I'd heard of it tonight.
And it wasn't, again, in all fairness, you're right, it was not in the draft. That was something that really just came up within the last week or so. So, in all fairness, that was not in the original draft that we gave you.
I'll withdraw my motion to defer.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we take a vote specifically on the language of the as a crow flies or as the truck drives, because I'd like to know what the thinking is of this body, because for me, I'm just super logical. And so the truck is not going to go in the air to put the fire out. The truck is going to go along the road, and that's how it's going to get there. So either the fire protection is there or it's not. So I'd like to take a vote on that. But so if we know we're comfortable with that piece, then I think we know what we need to do. If we're not comfortable with that piece, I think we know what we need to do.
Discussion on that, including our fire chief and some other folks, would it not be prudent?
How else is the truck going to get there? Is that a second?
let's do that. But I think we're the body that is going to vote on subdivision regulations, not the full commission. If we're happy with everything but the sprinkler thing, let's go ahead and vote on it and take that out for the time being. If you want to put an ad hoc committee together, even though we've done it for the last 5 years and have everybody and their brother talk about it, that's great. They can come back and give us the results, and then we can vote on it at that time. And if I understand right, at that point in time, it does have to go to the full commission for a 2/3 vote.
We're
I'm willing to take anything that has to do with sprinkler systems, period, including the hydrant distance, and pass the rest of the subdivision.
There's one on the floor already.
I'll withdraw my motion. It's fine.
Sorry?
I said I'll withdraw my motion on the vote. It's fine.
Second. Okay. 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 What was the new motion?
See, what's the motion?
I think the thing we need to address right now,
could you-
is
the
the
mic-
thing
the
that we're hung up on is as the crow flies or the truck drives, okay? Someone make a motion. Someone make a motion.
My motion is to move the subdivision regulations forward with the exception of the wording that deals with the sprinkler system requirement as well as the language on fire hydrant distance.
So, yeah, you're talking about just the fire hydrant distance that we talked about.
The distance being
what's already in here, because we didn't. The wording you saw up there is not what's
It's
in
not
the
the
draft.
1,000-foot requirement. It's the as the crow flies, specifically as the crow flies or as the truck drives.
Okay.
That that I would like to be discussed in an ad hoc committee of stakeholders involved, and at that point in time, they can come back and let the stakeholders tell us what they think they'd like to do.
You're talking about the sprinkler system?
I'm talking about the sprinkler system, the ad hoc committee for sprinklers. And in the meantime, this is not my motion. I'm just still talking, still thinking. In the meantime, the subdivision regulations go forward with that exception. We vote on that. That's right. And once the sprinkler committee has met and come back to us with a report, and once we have all decided on how we feel the crow flies versus truck drives distances, then we'll take a vote, send that up to the full commission per the Attorney General's, and have the 2/3 vote.
The truck flies, the crow flies, the drives, that doesn't go before the county commission.
Okay. Well, we'll just vote on that.
Well,
yeah. It's just a sprinkler system then.
It would be clean if we were to decide to defer, to remove that from the section tonight, point blank, and then move. That's not what I heard.
Did I not say that for you?
Well,
that's right.
Yeah, and basically
crow flies isn't in there.
Right, the language about the crow flies versus truck drives, all that, that's not, only thing it says right now is that fire hydrants shall be placed to ensure lots within all subdivisions are within a maximum of 1,000 feet of a hydrant, with a note on the final plat stating fire hydrant shall be installed per the regulations of the water provider. That's what it currently says.
Okay, so why not just go ahead and leave that in, and at some point in time, we all get together and decide about crow flies versus truck drives, and then we can amend it up or down.
As I understand what you're saying, and let me just make sure I'm clear on this.
I'm glad you do, because I'm not sure I do.
What I'm hearing you say is you want to move the subdivision regulations forward as presented without that language up there.
Correct.
Without what's the citation, the whole code citation for what the fire sprinkler would be Article 3, letter D, 4C, taking that part of it out. Yes. Yeah, because that 3D in front of it, that's the whole citation. You want that part of it out. Okay. And an effective date, that's something we've talked about a little bit here today. Are we talking immediate upon passage, basically? Because basically this is where this ends, except for the sprinkler requirement. Do you want that in effect tomorrow morning when we wake up, or would you rather, because I think from staff standpoint, we were thinking, maybe make it effective September 1st, or even if the county commission was going to consider the sprinkler part in October 1st, that was something we were considering. I didn't know.
You're confusing me now.
When do you want the regulations to become effective, I guess is the...
Of the subdivision regulations
Right.
without the sprinkler.
Without the sprinkler, right, yes, sorry.
Well, would we vote on it tonight?
If that's what you want to
But
do.
you're saying it wouldn't go into effect until...
Right. If you don't specify, it'll go in effect tomorrow. When we wake up tomorrow morning, it's in
Very
effect.
good. Then I would make a recommendation that would be September, October. October 1st.
October 1st, fine. Okay.
October 1st.
Okay. So as presented, with the language that's already in here, minus the proposal we were talking about up there for the fire hydrants, take out 4C of the subdivision regulations, everything else the same, become effective October 1st.
That's my motion.
Is that what I understand?
That's my motion.
Okay.
Can I just clarify one thing? You both used the term "move them forward," and you're
right.
moving to approve
Right,
the
exactly.
subdivision regulations
That's right.
with this one modification effective October 1.
That's correct.
For clarification for those that will be dealing with this and the public, anything that's in the pipeline now continues out under the old regulations?
Correct. Anything that's submitted up until October the 1st is considered under the regulations in which it was submitted. Yes, sir.
Doug, I have a clarification as well. So if you remove the language about the crow flies or how the truck drives, then how will you apply the distance measurement?
We'll still apply it as we historically have, as the crow flies, until we have more discussion on that.
I just didn't want us to take both out and then not know
Right.
how we were going to measure it.
Right.
That's as the crow flies.
So the motion is to remove section 4C, page 25 from the subdivision regulations, and also the new language that relates to the 1,000-foot section, right?
Right. Just basically as it's already written.
We're
'cause
leaving
we
it as
didn't-
it's written.
Yes,
Leave it as
that's the way
written.
it's, the way, well, it doesn't say one way or the other, but that's how we've historically enforced it.
And are we going to commit to putting a committee together and continue to look at the sprinkler thing? Because
Yes.
I think we're shooting a bunch of people in the foot when we pass this to have property out in the outlying areas, and all of a sudden they're not going to be able to develop it. So I'm fine with passing this tonight as long as we keep looking at options, maybe get our ad hoc committee. It may take us 6 months. There's only been a very few come through with this.
Well, again, right, the numbers I gave you earlier, pretty much speak to the fact that we just don't see that come up
One
very often.
development.
Yeah, there was one waiver that out of 39.
So why don't we vote on the motion, and then after that's done, then we'll vote. If we need to make a motion on the ad hoc committee, we'll do that. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Vote.
Everybody understand the motion? Moving to approve the draft copy of the subdivision regulations effective October 1st with the removal of section 4C on page 25.
Josh, does that meet your legal ease? Thank you.
Effective date of October 1st, right?
Ready? Call the roll, gal.
Ron Allen. Jim Averwater. Veronica Buchanan. Will Jordan. Mike Cush. Craig Lynch. Pettis Reed. Steve Sandlin. Mike Vaught. Jeff Phillips.
It passes.
Now, the other issue we need to deal with is that section 4C. Been discussion on putting together some type of a committee to take a look at it. The other part of the discussion or was mentioned is just forwarded on to the county commission for their input and their approval. I think those are the two options that we got. We could forward it to the county commission. They would make a decision on it probably in September. And if they approved it, it would go back in and be effective, I think it could be effective October 1st. Is that correct, Josh? Or would it have to come back here to be approved?
No, it would not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that bill has to be voted on twice. Is that correct, Josh?
I don't think so. I think that's if you have a system in place that requires more than one reading. So like some municipalities require 3 readings for the passage of a legislative act. In those events, you would have to have all 3 readings or whatever. In our situation, I don't think so.
The bill calls for 2 special call meetings, though.
It's up to you. We could bring this back to the day meeting. I mean, I figure we talk about this at the day meeting coming up anyway. So if you'd rather us save the discussion for that time, when our brains are a little more fresh, I guess, that's certainly an option.
That's probably a smart thing to do. Once again, the other thing, just to move for us to have further discussion on it, or not to even do anything, which would probably cause further discussion on it, or go ahead and forward it to the county commission. I think we could do that. I think Dave and Josh were having a discussion. I think wouldn't the 2 meetings, one be here and one be at the county commission?
No, I'm still comfortable with what I said a minute ago. I think it's a single reading, one time, one vote at the county commission level.
And then it would be it wouldn't have to come back here to be approved.
Well, we had the discussion that you may want to put something in your subregs at that point because we've just taken that provision out. So now, as we sit here right now, when these become effective October 1, there's nothing about sprinkler systems in your subregs. So I'm thinking if the county commission voted to allow an option for builders to put in a sprinkler system, you may at that point want to add something back into your subregs to recognize what has now happened at the county commission level. But the effective date of what the county commission does would be effective on whatever date the county commission makes it effective, just like we did here tonight.
No downside to sending it to the county commission, because we can either approve it or not when it got back to us. It just gives us another tool in our toolbox, as I keep saying.
Well, then, if that's the case, could we, whenever our next meeting is, have an idea of what type of stakeholders need to be on this ad hoc committee? Example, Home Builders Association, insurance agents, realtors, fire marshals. I mean, to be thinking about who those players need to be so everybody's comfortable at the end of the day with what their recommendation is going to be. Can we pull something that fast together before the full commission votes in, when do you meet?
Thursday night is the next one.
Oh, well, forget that.
The next, just look at my calendar. Of course, obviously August, we're a little, I don't think it's going to happen by then.
September the 12th.
Right. That's the next, after this month, that's the next county commission meeting is on September 12th.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You know, since January, I know we have been discussing this thing, and we're talking about now an ad hoc committee. I feel like we've had an ad hoc committee. We've had the home builders. We've had everybody that's talked about a sprinkler. I think we've even talked about sprinkling yards as we've come across this thing. I've heard everything as we go through this. And we discussed it, and we've talked about a variety of people that has input into it. We've had public hearing, not announced public hearing, at all these different work sessions we've had. And we've had input and input and input into this, and we've all discussed it. Tonight, we've had the best input from everybody. This thing was on 99.7 this morning, way beyond their hours, to the point where I finally turned it off. I heard all of that. I personally think we've had the ad hoc committee from what we've got here. I think now that we just go ahead and send what we have here on to the county commission. Let them discuss it now and let them see what we get there. If it does not get that 2/3 vote, let it come back to us, and then we work further on it and take care of it from there. And I wish to make that motion that we send it on.
I have a motion to go ahead and forward it to the county commission in September for their consideration. We've already had a second. We've got 2 seconds now. That motion.
Josh, what can happen when it gets to commission? Can they decide if they want to establish an ad hoc committee? Can they defer it?
Yes. I don't know that you can guarantee as we sit here what the county commission will do with it at all. The statute doesn't really tell you anything beyond that the county commission will have to approve it by 2/3 vote. So I suppose the county commission could debate it over 1 meeting or 15 meetings or establish committees or whatever the county commission sees fit at that point. Because it's separate. I mean, we're kind of mingling it with our subregs, but the statute says it's got to be considered separately. So what exactly will happen once you guys send a recommendation to the county commission to please consider this issue? I don't know. I don't think we can control that.
You know which committee it will work through? Would it be public safety or would it be public works?
I don't know for sure. Probably public work. What do you normally come through on planning? Works?
Like this, yeah, anything that comes out of this body
Probably
committee
public
goes through
works.
Public Works. That'd be my guess.
So they wouldn't, it's not like the zoning where they would have to vote it up or down if they wanted to tweak it or modify it. It's whatever they can vote and pass it 2/3, right?
I think that's right because, again, the statute itself doesn't tell us what the language ought to be with respect to the sprinkler requirement. It just says if you're going to have one, it's going to require 2/3 vote. So I think, in theory, that committee could discuss what the language ought to be.
If it doesn't pass with a 2/3 vote, I don't know that we would want to send them something else, but let's say we should come up with, we have a revelation, something happens, and we have new information we want to send to them.
Right.
Is there any sort of limitation or statute on how long we have to wait before we send them something else?
Not in this statute, no.
Or if we're approached by the public and they want the ad hoc committee, then we can do that committee, and then if they come up with something, we could send it back then.
Motion, help me, Pettis, is to forward the language in section 4C to the county commission for its consideration. We got that motion in a second.
Who was the second?
Rhonda second and Mike second. So, any other discussion on that? I'm not sure that we can mandate to the county commission anything that they do, but it would be reasonable for them to consider it in September. Ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, public, and thank you, commissioners, for all of your deliberation tonight and discussion. And it's staff reports. Doug?
I have nothing. Eric, I'm not sure if Eric has anything.
Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 26th, over at the Planning Department. And we are adjourned. Thank you.